Okay.
We're resuming. Brian?
Let me, to follow up, since I'm well over my 1 hour, might as well just keep going. Okay, we had a hole of 343,000. Steve and I went through, and Steve and I are gonna argue whether left is left or right is right, but we can do that outside of this. If we as a board can agree to the conceptual right here, Steve and I agreed that by the, like, Monday or Tuesday of next week, we will issue a new revised, it'll be the Brian Kitzel pages that you got. I'll probably throw in 1 or 2 of the expenses and stuff like that, and we'll start with a page that says, all right, here were the big drivers of the differences. We'll be in balance, and here's the picture. You can all respond with comments to everybody. Next Monday, we have the town hall.
Town hall.
So maybe we'll put it out Tuesday morning, so that people concentrate on the town hall. We'll put out the new budget on Tuesday morning of next week. People can review it, come back with comments, but we'll be well in the process and meet with your 5-day thing. I mean, people can say this is stupid, or they can say it's great, but then we'll be out and rolling. Okay, so we started with a hole of 343,000. You remember that? That was where the revenue difference. If, and Jackson does want to talk about this, but if we do 2% inflation, Steve and I agreed it's $80,000 of that. The contingency, if we agreed to cap it to $500,000, that $40,000 will no longer be in the budget, so that's $120,000. For the athletic complex, you remember I said let's put in $100,000, so that instead of putting it in working capital, we'll put it in expenses to cover operating expenses for the athletic complex. It's a little heavier than our actual expenses, but it works. And then replacement reserves, we need $123,000. This approach right here, and this is a run rate difference, and gets us to 0. So we're there. Now, Dury says that we're all wimps, that this hole should be bigger because we should have the magazine. She's respectfully asked that anybody who voted for the newspaper rethink their decision, because there is funds available based upon this conversation this morning. Jack respectfully listened, I think.
No, I told her.
Oh.
I changed my view. I think if we've got the money, the magazine is a much better product and much better showing for celebration. Okay? I had thought that what we were trying to do was we would reduce that 8% down to 2% as a result of not spending the $37,000 on the magazine, and I really think that it's a better choice for us.
We can get you the 2%, the 949.33 with the magazine.
Okay, what I'd like to do though is I'd like to explore other options as far as companies and make sure that we've got the absolute best contract we can get, and maybe get a little lower than what we're doing. So a little further negotiation.
And JR is going to talk about when we get to that budget line for member communications, we can go in a little bit more detail on that.
But I think if I'm if I'm understanding correctly, that changes the consensus so that the budget that you should be preparing should be a budget based on.
Let me recap now. So here's what needs to happen for all the folks that are watching at home and that are in audience.
During lunch.
The direction that I'm getting now from the CROA board is for me to redo this budget to include the magazine, and it will have to come back to vote for this board, and it will be posted, and residents will have an opportunity to come and voice their opinion on that decision. And they have that right as homeowners to come and have their voice heard for them.
And we have a September board meeting coming up in a couple weeks. Let's do it in September if we're going to do a budget in October. Let's get this over with.
Yeah.
And so the deadline for the agenda for September board meeting is?
Was last week. but
Last Friday.
And then,
We'll work on it.
But I've also I have a space on it for the newspaper versus magazine, just in case, not knowing what was going to happen.
okay.
So, but it gets posted to the community, is it not next Wednesday?
It would be next week, yes.
So we
Next
have
Wednesday.
9 days to post the agenda to the community.
And then they have a week before the actual, or just under 7 days to look at it and be prepared for
And decide whether to
September.
show up or
Correct.
voice an opinion. Okay?
Okay, so that takes 343 to 380, so we're off by 37. Trust me, we got the money. We'll make it work. I'm not worried about that. So I think what we're ready.
There was a question on 2%.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about the 2%? I understand conceptually that we should be thinking about inflation. Inflation's a real deal. But there's also a sense that, to some extent, that's kind of an arbitrary. For example, one of the biggest expense line items that we've got, using your paradigm of look at the big stuff, is salaries and benefits for management. And if I understand properly, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a 3% increase that you work under for that line item. Am I correct?
I asked for, based on existing salaries, a 3% across the board. Now,
But
it's
that
not,
includes promotions and everything.
right. and
Right,
it's-
okay. So
right.
I'm just saying, as a benchmark, we've got a big line item that we're increasing by 3%. We've got lots of unknowns in our budget about not only revenue income streams, like Island Village and SOLA, but we also aren't talking about changing the apartment recreation fees, if I understand. You're
No,
not,
they are changed.
Yeah. We
by
also-
2% also?
So when you look at that pool of money, you have to look at the way Brian categorized on his budget. Everything that said rec facility
Yeah,
maintenance is
right.
part of the expenses that are used for the
So
formula.
that's what
to-
drives that number. We
Correct.
figure out the expenses and then divide it back. So
Yeah.
as a percentile, if nothing changed from what you proposed, what's the percentage increase in the recreation fee?
I'd have to go back up to that one.
Okay,
Remember
while you're
page
figuring that
51?
out, I think to come back, I almost don't want to revisit this now that I've got 4 votes for the magazine. But
You're arguing for the newspaper now.
I'm so conflicted. I'm not. So here's my point. We put out a survey and said that one line item, that in the weeds item, would have a cost impact per household for CROA members of about $7.50 a household. At 2% increase for CROA, we're talking about $20 a household, am I correct?
Roughly, yeah.
Okay. If we were to put out a survey, and to be clear, I do not want a survey, Mr. President, but if we put out a survey that said, would you be interested in taking a $20 increase in your CROA assessment so that we can do X, Y, and Z and balance our budget and so on, I am reasonably sure that it would be resoundingly unapproved.
And the perception right now is that the magazine is $20 extra a house.
Right. Now, my point about all this is simply to say that I don't think it's bad fiscal policy to put in a 2% increase. But I think we need to have a very clear understanding and a very clear discussion about why we're doing it and what it means, because I don't want to hear later, oh, look what they did. They raised our dues by $20 a year for what? You know, and
Okay.
for my $20, I want X.
Okay, what I think we should do when we have the budget presentation meeting is, let me go through my exhibits. We'll tailor them, son, but we'll tell the big story. For example, one of the things that was raised was the $8.8 million. What we should do on that is we should show big picture expenditures for pickleball, for a civic center and stuff like that. So it's no longer $8.8 million. It'll be $2.5 million or whatever the number is. I think we ought to talk. I think dealing with inflation, I could make an argument that inflation's higher than 2%, but I'm happy with 2%. And I think we ought to say that is prudent fiscal management versus having 0, and then 8%. You know, I would rather people could sit there and say, you know, you like living in this community? Yes, no. Everybody I talk to tells me don't screw it up. Okay, inflation, whether it be talks about salaries, whether we're talking about a landscape thing or something else, is real. So we should be moving it. We know we have a parks and facility master plan. We know we're going to update it, and we'll spend those monies at a point in time, as Jack said earlier today, if we find out we just got too much money, we've executed everything, we'll give those funds back through reduced rates in the future, but we're being fiscally prudent, and I'm perfectly comfortable making that argument and voting in favor of that if I had to stand on my 2 feet and do it.
And Jackson, let me make one more comment on the apartment rec fees. If we are to reduce our contingency, our contingency and our replacement reserve contribution, the apartment rec fee number is going to completely change. So we could spend our time here going through each one of these, but it's not going to add, because once we change those numbers, the apartment rec fee is going to be different. because those are part of that calculation also.
Those
But,
wouldn't go down, would they?
I have to look at it.
No, I don't
to
think
see-
we would charge them less.
So what you're doing though is you are charging based on actual expenses. So
Okay.
whatever changes we make will affect the actual number that they're gonna, because you divide it by the total number of units.
So just to be clear, we have two very different formulas for a CROA assessment and an apartment recreation
Yes.
fee.
Yes.
And I'm saying this because I'm not sure that everybody out there gets that. The apartment recreation fee is a formula based on specific line items, expenses divided by the number of apartment units with certificates of occupancy. So when SOLA closes and we lose X number of occupancies, that amount has to be shared over the existing apartment dwellers, right?
But the owners of the building though, the apartment owners don't pay that fee directly.
Yeah, okay.
They're probably charged back for it in their
I
rent.
think we can safely assume that the landlords are savvy enough here to
I don't
do
know,
that.
yeah, I'm
So, once we've done that, so that's the formula for the apartment rec fees. But we do not calculate the assessment for homeowners based on, here's our full expenses divided by 4,300 and whatever number we've got, correct?
You minus your revenues, but apartment rec fees are not counted in those revenues
I was
that you're
gonna say,
subtracting.
homeowners
It's
are
a-
exactly like that.
Yeah, it's
It is
exactly that.
revenues minus expenses, you gotta fill the bucket.
And so this number comes from all of our revenue except the apartment rec revenue, maybe some other things, less our expenses, and then that's the number that we come up with.
Correct.
That's what you're telling me?
Yes, that's exactly.
So if we had, just for, hypothetical purposes, if we had a part of the community that got foreclosure notices and had to shut down, and people stopped paying their CROA dues, and we had 50 or 100 unit owners in a particular year that weren't paying their CROA dues, what you're suggesting, Brian, is that we would go to these contingency and reserve funds to make up a shortfall in the short run, but ultimately, if that was a permanent change, we would have to change the assessment to reflect the fewer number of units or the greater number of units. Is that, am I
Well, the bank's
understanding
gonna
that
end
properly?
up owning them under foreclosure, and the bank's still required to pay the association dues.
For a year?
Or we foreclose on whoever the owner is that's not paying those fees. Now, it doesn't do us any good to own a bunch of condos
Right.
and not be collecting any money off of them. So the owner ultimately is responsible for paying association dues. The units aren't going away though. So if they're foreclosed on, eventually they'll be sold and bought by a new unit owner. And
Or if they're converted.
so the number stays the same at 4,300. I don't see that the 4,301 ever going down. It will go up once Island Village comes on, but it doesn't go. Or if they're converted to apartments, then it definitely
Then
would
it
go
goes
down.
down.
But that's more apartments in the pool now to pay apartment recreation fees.
So the creation of the CROA owner assessment is really a derived number from everything else that we do.
You
Is
can
that
take
fair?
these contra
Yeah.
revenues out of here.
Yep.
And it's pretty much every other revenue that you're bringing in, except for trash, because trash is a wash.
So when we say we want to increase that number by 2%, we're not really saying it's because we're increasing our budget by 2%. You're making a different argument, aren't you?
I'm saying, the argument I'm making is we got to balance one way or another. And I believe it is fiscally prudent to acknowledge that inflation is part of the real world. And at 2%, it's a nice round number, and we can say we've increased it by 2%. And if we, in the same world next year, I would argue for the same 2%, just because our underlying costs are going to go up 2%.
So
it's-
what's the 2% of? Is it the 2% of our overall budget?
The 930.72.
So it's the
times
2%.
1.02.
So it's
times
2% of-
4,321.
2% of the current fees, not
Yeah.
2% of the budget.
Yes, it's
Right.
just current.
I think that was your,
Yeah.
And I think the other second half to what Brian said is that it is an industry best practice standard of incremental increases year after year. So that way, when inflation hits, you're not burdening future boards with having to make massive increases to assessments. It becomes,
Yeah.
again, part of culture of you get used to a small increase every year as opposed to
It's
one
20
large one
bucks.
4 years
I
down the
mean,
road.
it's less than $2 a month to
Just-
keep up with the level of service and everything that we have in this community.
Just kicking it around. you can go higher, could you ever go lower? Could you do 1%? Or is that just still?
Strictly a board decision. I mean, I could make an argument for 1%, 3%, 2%. I mean, I picked 2 just because it's 2. I'm not arguing.
Last year's CROA board set precedent for you by doing a slight increase because they knew that the amount of expenses that they had would not be covered at 9/11/40 forever. So they
Because
did,
the prior,
$20
6
increase.
years was 0?
Right.
yes.
And I don't argue for that. I mean, like CCDD has went forever without increasing it, and you end up in a fiscally, in my opinion, fiscally irresponsible position. I think we should manage it well, and the place that we really have big reserves is on the working capital fund. We've talked about that. We've talked about changing the exhibits so that the 8.8 million is reduced by what the estimated costs of the master parks plan are. As time rolls on, maybe that goes away and people will have a reduction in the future or no inflation adjustment for a period of time. That can be explained. Where we are at today as a board, I think we've got to continue with that build-up because we know we've got the community center, which I know people want. We know we've got pickleball courts. I know we've got shade trees and dog parks. I know we've got Artisan Park wants a park. And I've had other people talk about other things. So that's the reality we're in. That's what, and I think 0 is just the wrong
Let
answer.
me just throw one thing out. I'm just looking at U.S. inflation rates from 1929 to 2020. Forecast for the rest of 2018 is 1.9%. 2019 is 2%. 2020 is 2%. 2017 is 2.1%. 2016 is 2.1%.
Averages out to 2%.
And I was aware of those numbers, which is why I chose 2%.
Yeah.
And then you're also looking at, for that 100,000 increase, scaling that up as we have more.
So,
On the
so the
100,000.
so the 2% inflation adjustment
No,
gives
go
us
down.
$80,000 for the whole community. Contingency, because we're gonna cap it at 500, because we got those funds, that's 40,000, that is a reduction right here, that's no longer gonna be reduced. So that's a permanent savings. Working capital, rather than putting it in working capital, we're gonna put it to operating funds for the athletic complex, because, we put it in place, and
Right.
we know we've now got annual expenditure, as part of the master parks plan that's created that. You know, in replacement reserves, if we drop it 123,000 a year, we're gonna be over reserved still.
And so, Brian, as you and I talk after this, we might need to have a conversation because the lower you drop that replacement reserves, the more it affects the apartment rec fees. If you take it out of working capital, I mean, it won't change the number for apartment rec fees. So
At
that's
some
one
point,
thing that we have
at
to
some
look
point in time, I have said it earlier, Steve, Susan, and I need to talk about
Yeah.
sausage. And that'll just blur your eyes out. So trust us conceptually to get the big picture right and to come back and tell you, this is why we did what we did and this is why.
So one final question from me. When you're walking down the street, Brian, and somebody comes up to you and they say, hey, Brian, I heard there's $8.8 million that's going to be in the funds and you want to raise my CROA dues by 2%.
My answer would be that the $8.8 million is not real. Go to that page. And here's the reason I would say that. Keep going.
I'm trying. I'm working on it.
Steve is learning how patient I am.
Hold on, it's
Okay.
up, right?
It's what it says, careful, handle with care.
So, we know we want to do a community center. I'm probably going to put a number out there of $4 million. Jack thought it was 3.5, and we know it'll be higher.
5 to
So,
6.
Okay, pick your number.
6.
So let's just say 4. Let's say pickleball carts are 150,000. What's your Artisan Park thing gonna be?
100,000.
100,000. So we'll give example given, and we'll probably have $1 million pot for other things. But if we got $4 million and $1 million, $5 million, then out here, we don't have $8.8 million. We got $3.5 million. Can you swear on a Bible the county is gonna reimburse us? No, you can't swear on a Bible that's gonna happen. And when we get to rolling out, something else new will come in. So we can make, your point was extremely valid this morning. When this gets redone, it'll show a $3 million number or something, and it'll come with a proper caveat that if the master plan gets fully, when we do it this time, and I know the last one also had an estimate. This time we should have an estimate, and we should probably even estimate more conservatively than we did last time. factoring in nonsense. So it'll work, and then the board in 2023 can look at it and decide whether to build it more or let the thing lapse or cut it in half. That's a business decision.
Well, can I add just a little bit more meat to that argument? They're two completely different sets of dollars, and the 2% that you all are discussing today is what it costs to maintain and operate this association at the level of service that they currently have. So my next question to that homeowner that asked me would be, are you one of the 93% that are satisfied with the way this community is running? Or are you one of the 7% that aren't satisfied? And there's an argument to be made that those folks that, I went to a session at FRPA last week where a lady as the keynote speaker was a park redeveloper in the Bronx and then now throughout the United States. And someone asked her, because she had a strong contingency against her that didn't want her to do what she was doing in the communities, and someone asked her, how do you change those people's mind? Her response to 1,000+ people in the room was, you'll never change those people's mind. And she said, we call those people CAVE people. And of course we said, well, what does CAVE stand for? Citizens Against Virtually Everything. And it's not just in your community, it is throughout the United States. So you have to decide, do you want to manage to the 93% of people that are satisfied or the 7% that will probably never be satisfied? The other $8 million that you have is to make amenity enhancements in your community. Are you happy with not having any athletic fields? Are you happy with no splash pads, no more pavilions, no more shade structures? And if you are, then you don't need to be concerned with the $8 million. But if you're not, the $8 million is there to do those things for you. So that's the right answer.
Okay,
Can we
but
tag
I'll
the video
even,
so that we've got Steve calling us cavemen?
Not you. Just
no,
saying.
the money that is in reserves is not restricted.
Yeah.
The worst thing that could happen is that we give the money back in the future.
Yeah.
Somebody could argue, well, I may move in 2 years. Well, okay, sirrah, sirrah. If you really want to vote me out of office, go. You can impeach me, I don't care. But that's where we're at. So we are, just like you argued about the magazine versus a newspaper, we are arguing to make decisions on what is prudent. The 2% is prudent. The building this up is prudent. We should reflect the additional expenses. I agree that was an error, and we'll fix that in the next version. And we've got a good story to tell.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted it on video. I'm only slightly facetious about,
Your wife is going to disagree with you.
This isn't the first time.
I'm a homeowner.
And he's not?
There's been a lot of talk, while you were up there, Brian, about the master plan and how it needs to be updated. I don't disagree with you that it needs to be updated. I would like to have some assurance from the board that the remaining items that are in the master plan that was done the last time would be given priority over new plans. I don't think it's fair to say, oh, we promised you back in 2015 that you were going to have this, but now we're doing a new one, and so we're going to...
I think the proper way to say it would be is that we should enhance it. We should have a good time frame. We should update that. Pickleball courts, I don't think were in there before. Something else wasn't in there before. What is the prioritization going forward? It was a
prioritization should be what I don't see how you can take away something that was there in 2015 and has not yet been done.
Well, I think the plan was 2002.
Well, yeah, I think it's a very valid point. And I talked to 4 different companies that do master planning when I was at the conference. And I explained to them our current situation, that we used the 2015 plan with some older data, 2010 survey data, 2013 stakeholder meeting. But we needed a tool to help us move the dollars along and start building amenities in town. It's time for it to be updated, but they need to take strong consideration into what was in the original plan. And they'll do that, but they'll also do a needs assessment. They'll also do a stakeholder meeting. And it's called a triangulation methodology, where the top things will float to the top, and you'll start spending your dollars based on what the community says they need. Again, though, if the community does nothing else next year related to CROA, they need to show up and they need to have their voices heard when it comes to this, because you can't come back 6 months later and go, well, I never got a chance to say what I needed. This is the opportunity to do it during master plan needs assessment.
So what I'm not hearing is that what is on the master plan we're currently working under is not guaranteed to be on a revision.
I think we need to tell the whoever we select to do this, the planning firm, that they have to take strong consideration into what was in the 2015 master plan. And then they have, they're planners for a living. I mean, I'm not a certified planner, so they have methodology and formulas that they use to come up with what the needs of this community are. And it will truly reflect the needs of this community, based on all these different,
Strong consideration is not guaranteed.
right, I can't,
That's
there's
the
no
translation.
guarantee, no.
Well, the only problem with the guarantee.
Unless you all guarantee it, if you can, you at any
That
point can
master
say
plan-
we guarantee it,
that master
but
plan-
It's always a plan, it's a plan, it's a plan.
if I was a board member and I was making my decision, I would want it to be based off of what a planner, a licensed planner
Right.
does through their calculations and their formulas. That gives me a better idea of what this community really needs.
Yeah. So as we're moving forward. Yeah.
Next.
So where are we?
I think
Are we at the
8,000
closer?
Or the 8.8, I think when you say what happens when somebody stops you on the street and says, you got 8.8, you're not gonna have 8.8.
You don't have 8.8.
In 2023, because you got a community center that, if you wait that long, you're talking 4 years down the
We're
road.
going to show it properly.
But you have the
It's not-
assets,
so
though.
it's
You
not
have
shown-
that value worth of
You gotta
assets.
show them, there's not gonna be 8,
So-
it says 8.8, but you're not gonna have it. It's
So do you
gonna be
even
spent.
need to have that column?
Well,
Just a question.
it gives you an idea
I
of what
think-
you have in your bag to use.
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
what were we talking about, Brian, putting a column in there for,
Yeah,
what
I
is the
mean-
community center actually gonna cost, and
Yeah, I mean.
Potential
potential
expenditures?
expenditure
For
for a
what
community center?
for what
the-
I send out next Tuesday morning, or Steve sends out next Tuesday morning, we will have a potential expenditures row in here, so that this is less reflecting the facts of what we're thinking about.
But a planner, though, will give you better estimates than I'm going to be able to give you, because that has been brought back up in meetings before, that your old master plan doesn't reflect the actual cost of facilities. I was taking a best guess from what other directors told me and from doing research, but you don't know until you get real estimators that that's what they do for a living.
We had that with the concession
And we didn't
stand.
pay in 2015 to do it. I did it because I knew how the basis of putting one together, but you didn't have any real direction of how you wanted to spend your money. So we had to compile that data and give you something to start spending your dollars.
That's why I'm thinking, at a minimum, we have to do what you all did last year, is we need to go out, if this community center is gonna be something that we want as a community, we need to get some numbers, and we need to go out again,
Take field trips.
take field trips and hit these different community centers around this part of the state or wherever, and get some real numbers and some ideas on this, and then we can come back. Because otherwise, just saying 5 million or 6 million for community center, we don't know.
Yeah,
We're just
we
kind of
don't.
shooting from the hip.
And the scope of the community center is going to change those dollars.
Sure.
I mean, if you want the Taj Mahal community centers, it could be $10 million.
Yeah.
It just depends on what that looks like.
And this helps too, because you're saying, we're gonna have this much money at this time, maybe we can enhance the community center.
Right.
Or, maybe we
Jack, go
can
ahead,
make it
Ben.
nice.
Or phase 1, phase 2?
I go along with the numbers we have there, the estimates, but I just want to make sure our correlation is pretty close to what our history has been as far as 300 sales per year. Okay.
Yeah, it's really close.
25 per month.
Yeah. And I think on this one, you're better off being conservative, and if you get more, then that's
That's nice.
great.
That's a nice
But,
problem.
yeah, we've been consistent around 25.
So we at closure with Brian's?
Okay, magazine in, these 4 items being the big picture, Steve and I will arm wrestle this week.
Ooh, boy,
Is that an accepted approach?
Yes.
I say yes.
Okay.
Am I done?
Yes.
My hour over with.
The hour's over. It is now 11:30, just so the timestamp.
So we can move
Yes.
this as quickly as you guys want to on how far you want to get into the weeds, but if you all go to page 51 of your packets.
Skipping a lot of pages here, Steve.
And I'll ask Tony to come up because she's first up on the agenda.
Are we at administrative and general expense?
Yes.
Okay. On the,
Page 51.
Page 50 and 51 of your packet.
Page 50 what?
50 and 51, it's kind of split, of the CROA board
Oh,
packet.
93 pages?
Yes.
That one?
it's under covenants homeowner expense?
No, legal and professional.
It's not page 51.
Yeah, this is the knowledge.
It's
Numbered-
50
Numbered
through
51.
51.
It says numbered 51, covenants and homeowner maintenance.
It's the
Right,
section
it's the
above it.
No,
future.
page number.
Right? It's the
It
future
is,
calling, they
it
want their
says
money.
page
It
number
starts on 50.
51.
It starts on 50.
50, where's the top of page 50?
Starts on 50.
Let me just make sure your page numbers aren't different than what we have
Yeah,
up
legal
there.
It
information.
says 51, 51.
Yeah, go to
Starts on
50. I said
50.
Oh,
page
page 50.
So on the
That's where it starts.
Page 50.
There we go, that makes more sense.
Okay.
So, as was
There's a
just
difference.
asked of me, can we just focus on the big picture items here? And so one of the conversations we've been talking about is the contract for ARC with our town architect and our landscape architect, and I'm going to ask Tony if she can just talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So one of the things that I reviewed while making this budget was their current contracts, which were older, and they were renewing on a yearly basis. So we have actually updated those with our general counsel to include things like conflict of interest and also some of the things they're now doing with all of you, such as board projects that weren't on the list before. So both of those things are now included. Some other things that are included on this general legal and professional
I'm
services.
sorry,
Sure.
I know, this is like moot court. You have something that you want to present, and I'm going to stop you if you
Sure.
don't mind. I've looked at the two contracts that were sent out. Are those the new contracts?
Correct.
And that's what you're calling the conflict of interest language that's in there?
That our attorney put in there.
That's what we asked,
No
General
way.
counsel to put
There
it.
is no way. I'm sorry. Those are not conflict of interest provisions. Those do not even begin to get at the conflict of interest that we're talking about, or anything remotely like that. And I know you guys did this all in good faith.
we're not general counsel, though. We sent it to them with the intention of what the board was looking for, and if it is meeting what you're asking for, we can certainly send it back to them, but I'll
Right.
let you all discuss,
Well,
and if you have a different opinion
With
on
your
how you want
permission,
it, then...
the conflict of interest is that these individuals that we pay a monthly salary and an hourly salary should not be able to represent private clients before the boards that they advise. It just doesn't make, I mean, that's my view. I'm one of 7, maybe the rest of the board feels it's okay. I don't think there's any way that even these two men of great integrity, and I've known Jeffrey for 20 years, has great integrity. I have no questions. But I believe we're putting him in an impossible position when we say, Jeffrey, you can take a private architectural client, or Albert, you can take a private landscaping client whose project has to go in front of ARC, and then you are the advisory individual to that committee. And so, to me, the contract has to say you either are doing this work exclusively in the sense that you cannot take private clients in Celebration, or we've got to go out and find different consultants.
Or volunteer.
Right, right. Well, I don't know that, I don't even know that it's the compensation. I'm not asking them to volunteer, they're experts, okay? What I don't want is that we have an appearance that if you want to get a project approved, hire those guys because they're the advisors. Now, that's not fair to them because they don't behave that way. But I don't think it takes a big jump to think, well, that's just the way it's set up. You know, hire the inside guys and you get what you want. And we shouldn't be doing that. These should be independent consultants. They should not be taking that. When I read the conflict of interest language, it was, and I say this with all respect to counsel, which I think has done a wonderful job this year, that's boilerplate Zoom legal language. It's, sorry, just doesn't cut it. Not even close to what we were talking about.
Was the basis for that decision because they're non-voting? Based on saying that there's no conflict because they're non-voting members?
They're advisors, correct, and ultimately,
That was the reason for the no
ARC's
conflict.
ARC makes the initial vote, and then the homeowner has an appeal process where they can come back to the board, where, again, you rely on your advisor to give you advice. Now, the language was added to the contract based on the conversations that we've heard the CROA board having about conflict of interest, so we took a stab at it, and
But wasn't there
sounds
also,
like it didn't quite meet where you were looking for, but...
Concern, I don't know if it's the same one, but I think my concern was that we hired a separate company
yeah,
that employs the same person, Albert, we can all say. Albert has a contract with us as CROA, and we also hired Albert through a
That-
third-party company. And I understand that that company may have different materials or whatever the case is, but it just seems questionable to me that we're paying for the same person
Yeah, and I
going
hear
along the more expensive route.
I completely hear what you're saying. That was debated by the board.
Right,
And
we do.
and there was a consensus to move forward with that company. This is a different conversation of whether or not you want to budget for them to be consultants, advisors to the ARC.
So there's almost like, there's three different things. What you just brought up, which is what I remember us discussing before, what you're bringing up now, which could be language, and then the third is a budget. You know, what role do we want it? What level of service do we want from these two professionals? That's the budget question.
Right, and I think we're
So we
prepared
have
to
three
tell you
different
why
things.
we're recommending to put them into the budget. Tony can talk to you a little bit more about the value that they bring to ARC and to the process, and then the value that they bring to the board ultimately, that may not have subject matter expertise when it comes to architectural review. Because you have to make a final appeal decision that could have legal impact, and it's important to have someone that fully understands the design.
I am not in any way suggesting that we shouldn't have people in those
I know.
roles.
Right.
My entire objection is that these individuals, based on the contracts that have just been prepared, make it possible for them to, I could go out and hire Albert and Jeffrey right now for a project at my home that ARC would have to review. There's nothing that prohibits that. And I think that's wrong. I think that if they want the contracts with Celebration, they have to forego private business here. If they don't want to forego private business, then they need to remove themselves from consideration for these contracts. They are not the only architects and the only landscape architects in Florida, and we can find people to do that expertise for us and pay them under the same terms.
I mean, do we have
That's-
another architect that knows the pattern book and the history of the
Oh,
town?
sure we do.
In town?
Sure we do. We've got, yes, sure we do.
So, but that conflict issue hasn't been addressed in this document to
Right.
date.
Right.
Well, but I think that that's a different argument, though.
That's
If you agree in the budget amount, you guys can say, we're not comfortable with signing that contract yet
Right.
until you fix this language.
But we can, for the budget purposes, we can talk about line items. We have 30K and about 11K. I mean, we-
I have no problem with the line item budget.
So, but that's the, yeah. But before signing contracts with any individuals, we need to have that conflict resolved.
So we can,
Yeah, we can do that.
we can approve the line item and
But- and
just
take the
deal
na-
with the other part later.
In other words,
Yeah.
take the names out.
Right,
It's
the
not
names
about
out.
the name. It's
And we
about the
do-
role of an architect specialist with whatever criteria we establish, and no conflicts.
Somebody needs to,
Yeah.
you have to put somebody in those spots.
That's right.
but We'll deal with that later.
Well, and to be fair, when we do
But the-
revisit that conversation, I want to make sure that I see three other heads nodding in that direction also. I definitely know where Jackson's coming from. He's been very clear on his point, but I want to make sure that that's the direction of the board.
Let me talk about those spots, though.
Can Tony
okay?
speak with the value?
That spot never existed 5 years ago, okay? That was done because the former head of the ARC was basically terminated by CROA, and we replaced him with a much younger board, and we felt that we had a need with somebody who had some experience. This current board has been in place now for 5 years, okay? If they don't know the design guidelines, then we're in trouble.
But you know, I've sat there in those ARC meetings, they have a new person on there now, can't remember her name.
Nicole
And
and Jessica.
And the thing is, what
There's two new
I
ones.
see a lot in there, Jack, I see a lot of, and I've been involved in front of the ARC myself as a homeowner, but what I see is they really depend on, they still go to these consultants. I mean, they still listen to them because they have questions and they don't understand. They get an explanation from them. So I don't know, I see what you're saying,
Well,
but I
what
don't know.
troubles me is that ARC is the only one in our charter that we have the ability that we can pay for their expertise. And yet, we're not paying for any expertise of the ARC committee. We're paying for a consultant.
I think, I'm comfortable having the consultants. I am.
My
My,
que-
my only concern was paying them multiple ways.
My other question then is, how much have we been paying them?
And I think we got that.
Not the
data.
budgeted amount, but how much have we paid them?
No, we got that. I think Susan sent that out.
Yeah.
But I think any architect that would work in town with clients
Get to them.
and then forgo, I mean, how, we can't get an outside architect that doesn't want any.
It's a choice. It's a choice.
That could advise. I'm just saying it's a different.
If you want
Trying to find
names, I mean,
someone that
Looney
has
Rick's
expertise that's
Kiss
gonna forgo
is the
the
town
clients.
architect. They don't take individual clients in Celebration. I mean, there are architects, Debbie, that could advise the board or the ARC that wouldn't take Celebration business. I think it would be just as silly to say, Danny Bumpus, who does a lot of work, including work for this board, should be the advisor on ARC. That would be obvious to us that it's a conflict.
Well, do you want to speak to his value anyway, or?
Sure thing. I think she's looking up.
You're doing great so far, Tony, really.
Yeah, so I would like to point out, though, that 3 out of the 5 ARC members are actually new. They haven't been there 5 years. There's only 2 that have probably been there about 4 to 5 years. So that makes a difference, too, because they are not all fluent 100% on all the guidelines and the pattern book. They might know it, but I wouldn't say that they're 100% like Jeffrey is. So that makes a difference. And then the reason for Albert, obviously, Jeffrey is not a landscape architect. And 50% of our applications every month are landscape.
What
So that
percent?
makes them 50%.
50? So
45
half.
to 50.
50% of your applications are landscape, why are we paying Jeffrey 3 times the amount we're paying Albert?
Because he does a lot more additional things. So he comes to appeal meetings. He is on call every day if we need him. So he charges 3 hours a week, which means anytime during the week I can pick up the phone and he's available for any sort of questions. That includes for condos, that includes for single family, that includes for any additional items we have.
Including proactive help to residents that have questions, and we would say, well, we can check with the
Absolutely. That also includes updating the design guidelines, so he'll come in and meet with us for that as well. So there's a lot of additional things that he does that Albert might not do.
How many design guidelines have been updated?
In the last few years, so,
Susanna did at
last 8
least
months.
3 or 4 last year.
and then she did probably, I would say probably 8
Right.
in the last couple of years.
In the last 8 months.
In the last 8
Because I was
months,
involved in the majority of those other ones.
last 8 months, we've done 1 so far this year.
Is management comfortable with the amounts, forgetting who's getting paid and the potential conflict of interest, are you comfortable with the amounts in these contracts? Do these seem like reasonable amounts to have good quality services provided?
Yeah, I will tell you the best way for me to explain this is that we're talking about the department service that we're required to provide based on your governing documents, having the least amount of complaints. And, I mean, we do not get a lot of calls on the time and turnaround for ARC. There are people that aren't happy with the decision, but that's a completely different argument. I mean, this is a well-oiled machine, and this is one of those things for $30,000. It's not broke. I don't understand why we want to do anything to change it at this
Yeah,
point.
I'm not suggesting,
I know
I am
you're
not
not.
suggesting that we're not paying enough. I
Right.
just wanted to hear you say that you've got enough, that these contracts, if we change the names, the contracts are the way you like them otherwise.
Yes,
Is that
they're
a fair
very
statement?
beneficial to us.
Okay.
So you're looking for some head nods that says this 30 and this 10 or 11?
For budgeting purposes.
For budgeting
and then we
purposes.
can hash out.
Is that where we
You
are?
all need to approve the contracts when we bring them back in front of you. To be honest, they're old and they need to be updated, and they need that language in there about the conflict of interest, and they need to be under our new format. So we'll bring them back for you to ultimately approve, but yes, we're looking for the placeholder for the dollars.
Yeah, and I know that you've made the point about that conflict in other settings of the board, but I'm not sure that it was linked to the update of their contracts per se. That the conflict of representing homeowners and going before the board and serving as a consultant. So I know we've had that conversation, but I think circling that back around to get the contracts worded correctly, and then the consultants have a choice to make.
Right.
Is that?
I have tried to stay out of direct conversation with counsel. And I think you have too, right? And so I have deliberately stepped back to let you generate that and create it. But if I haven't been clear, hopefully today I have been explicit
Yes.
about what that contract has to say if it's going to get approved by me, at least as one of 7. If I don't know that we need to say more about it. It should be clear to our counsel what we want this contract to say.
Well, it needs to be very clear from the consensus of the
Yeah.
board that this is what you want. And I think that's
So-
what's
so
important,
two
to get the
things.
proper language.
So 2 things. Are we agreeing with Jackson's point about conflict of interest for the written documentation of these and other consultants? Would this be fair for other consultants too?
Aren't we just doing the budget now? I mean,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
different
Right.
line item.
Yeah, so that's
This is
one,
gonna
and
be
then
a CROA
are we
board
okay?
meeting
Another
conversation,
meeting,
I think.
another meeting?
Yeah.
I'd rather just.
Okay,
If
so we're okay?
comfortable with the amounts. If
the
we
amounts
pay
okay?
anybody that came in, that amount.
Yeah.
That's all we need to know, right?
Is that okay for now? Is that where we are? Brian, are you,
I'm fine with the amounts.
okay. So
Don't
generally,
sound so enthusiastic.
generally, we're okay with these.
It sounds to me like,
We're losing a lot
I
of
have
work.
went to, I'm looking for Jack's question here, but I've went to the meetings. It certainly seems to me like the ARC committee leans on Jeffrey big time.
Tremendously.
Yes, yes, they do.
And
Then I have a question for you. Why do we have a committee? Why don't we just have one individual?
The committee is required by the governing
Is he
document.
making, no, it's not statute, it's not statute.
He's giving background information.
No,
so much
what I'm
on
saying
history.
is make him the committee then.
No.
Because the rest of the guys are not, they're yes.
It lists the number of
He's an
committee
advisor.
members.
It's not a-
Yeah, Jack, with all due respect, it is required by statute.
No, it isn't.
It tells you how many members you're supposed to have.
Yep, 3 to 5.
I think ARC's in the charge.
ARC is
By the charter.
By the charter.
And it tells you how many you're supposed to have. I think it says 3 to 5.
Correct.
I'm just saying, if one person whose voice is making the decision for all 5 of these, why are 5
Yeah,
people
but
voting?
just because they're advising doesn't mean that the ARC has to listen to advice. They could always say, we disagree and we're going to do it this
Okay.
way.
And
All
then
right,
have,
I'm overruled on this thing, so let's move on.
Okay.
Okay, so we're okay with the budget? Okay. Separate discussion on what the language might be?
Other time.
Okay, got it. Moving on.
The only other items we have underneath this category then are audit expenses, which are standard. I mean, they're what they were last year, as long as you don't have any issues with the company that's doing the audit. They've only done it 2 years. We talked about when we switched to at least give them a 3-year time frame of doing the audits. You have salaries in here. You have, Tony just talked to you about legal and professional. There's a large chunk, $80,000 in board initiatives that Brian and I will work through next week this week on what that looks like being pulled out.
Have we changed staff at all?
No, we're, from this line, we're pretty standard where we've been.
Yeah.
So there's no other really big ticket items in this line. And if you all are okay, we can move to recreation then.
Okay. Ready to move?
Okay, which page is that?
Don't know yet. We're moving to recreation expenses, 1 o'clock.
So I will find where this starts real quick. And I'll tell you what page number to go to.
I think it's,
Is this also one of the areas where we have income? Yeah, yes?
There
Okay.
is, yes. Okay, so the big items that you're probably going to want to talk about here, let's tackle special events first.
What page?
So we will go down to page 65?
Is that what's numbered in the upper right corner?
Yes.
Actually, it's 64 in the upper right corner.
64, it starts on 64.
64 and 5, got it, thank you.
Net programs, events,
Yep.
6717.
Yeah, so I'll frame it for you, and then I'll let JR answer any questions or talk a little bit more about it. But all the events that are listed here under the expense detail line list all of their expenses. There's another event detail line for income that shows you what income we're bringing in for each one of these events. But I believe it's a net total expense of around $100,000 for this because of some new.
34,000?
Sorry.
134,000.
Yeah, that's the total expenses, but when you take off the revenue, it's
So it's net of about
about a $100,000 expense, which in the past, it's been around $90,000. With the additional events that the Special Events Committee is recommending, it increases by about $10,000. Now, the Special Events Committee did hold a meeting. They went through each one of these lines and they voted, and they have approval to make this request. So this request that you see for these events are coming from both management and the Special Events Committee. And Dory Moyer, as the chair of the Special Events Committee, is here that can help with answering any questions also.
Is this, and I'll just ask some dumb questions, at the last meeting, PJ spoke and I think Dury spoke.
Yep.
Are they both talking about this?
This is the balls in the jar.
So this was PJ's,
Yes.
This is
President?
all the sequin balls.
Yes.
So the increase from 121 to 134 allows you to do everything that will make you happy.
Yes,
everything fits.
yes.
All the balls are in the jar.
I think you're $4 short, but I'll throw in the $4.
We'll spend a couple hours finding it.
And most of it is bare bones.
Yeah.
Many of the events are bare bones, so.
So Brian,
Where's
you
that increase? I was
said
at the
that
meeting, we went through everything, it was good.
you included all this in the 2019, and you said we're good, right?
I said we're good. I
And
actually.
you recommended it?
I recommended it,
Okay.
but I did not recommend bare bones. I'm of the opinion that I would rather have one budget that is a proper budget.
Do it right.
Yep.
And then don't come back over to us next year, because I'll still be here next
Bare
year.
bones.
So in other words,
Get it
you
now.
you have one chance. Get it right. So is this, because I do have a lot of people talk about, these are the things that make the town special, whether you're talking about downtown owners or residents and stuff like that. So is the 134, 114 the number that you want? And
Bare bones is a relative number.
Well, no, I want to hear this talk.
For
And
example,
we don't know.
for example, we only budgeted $2,600 for the 4th of July.
They waited all day, they deserve the
I agree.
opportunity to
Yeah,
speak, so go ahead.
I will speak because some of the, because I'm old and I get it.
PJ, why don't you come up and
So-
have your face on TV so you can
Just know your,
face the rest of the crowd.
and your voice. And I know you don't have your prop today.
Yeah, because no one.
While PJ's
no one
walking
can
up,
hear
let me
you.
just, while she's walking up, talk, let me just say something. JR built a individual budget spreadsheet for each one of these events. The Special Events Committee looked at it from a big picture standpoint, so I'll let PJ talk a little bit more about.
Well, then let's have you both speak about what JR originally had, why you came back with what you came back with, so we can really understand what's here.
Okay. We actually wanted more.
How much more?
Ballpark,
Make it big.
ballpark.
I think it was about 24 grand more.
More?
Yeah.
Okay.
And here's where I come up with that number, okay? There are things that we wanted to do. There are things that we, as a committee, decided in order to implement new programs, we had to cut back on some of the programs. I'll give you an example. I'll give you two examples. One is the father-daughter dance, which there's no way we would ever get rid of the father-daughter dance. However, over the years, we tried to make it better and better, you know, with little extras here and extras there. And you've had committee members dipping into their pockets to do that because the money hasn't been in the budget. Now, I am not speaking for myself, but I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the contributions, financial contributions of a lot of the committee members. And I'm excluding myself from this. What my husband doesn't know won't hurt him.
He knows now.
No.
No, he doesn't.
Do the
listen.
timestamp.
So, we've had, for an example, the little swag bags. We wanted all the little girls to have a little swag bag, you know, like it was a special event and go home with something special. We've had to cut that out or pull it out of our own pockets, okay? The extra little centerpieces, the things that make it special. We can still have the event, but to make it really, really special, there just isn't enough money if we want to do some additional programs. Another thing that we actually feel fairly strongly about is Founder's Day, okay? About 5 years ago on the committee, we had already planned for, I think it was the 18th anniversary, so it's 3 years ago. We said, you know, we'll do the 20th because that's a big deal, and we already have things planned for this year. But we'd like to see the community go to an every 5-year blowout and just have a nice little family community thing on years 1, 2, 3, 4, and then, you know, every 5 years do, you know, the blowouts that we're used to with the concerts on Friday night and the hoopla on Saturday and all like that. We'd like to take and keep the tradition, but just tweak it a little bit. And by tweaking it a little bit, then we have the extra money to add, like the extra concert here or the extra musical programs there. But the committee, when we came up with our list, we had about 24,000 more in there, and JR, we had to pick him up off the floor and put him back in the chair because he was going, oh my gosh. So that's my,
PJ,
as a committee member, that's my input.
You followed the guidance of the board.
That is correct.
Okay.
You asked us to tell
Thank
you
you.
what we wanted, and that's what we wanted, and then we
And
were
you
cut
told
back.
JR, so JR took it out, just to be
Yeah,
clear.
well, I mean, in all defense,
Just to
they
be clear.
were trying to
No,
realistically
that's fine.
look within the
He's
budget.
trying to balance it so that
Yes,
it gets through, okay?
but that's where we,
Good.
is that about right?
I think events is something we want to skimp on. mean,
No,
that's a
I don't
big
either.
part of this community.
I think that's the sense of the
Two
board.
quick questions. One would be
Thank you,
for
PJ.
PJ Dory. A couple things say $0, so mother, son as an example. Did you cut those out? What's,
Well, we cut that out because of the interest level,
Okay.
was just not there.
Okay.
So.
so any 0 item is cut
Right.
completely? Okay.
Is there a replacement for that, for something else?
Yeah. There may be, if we were to do more of a family type of event, but right now we were just going to eliminate it.
Second question would be for Brian and Steve. Certain events and maybe JR as well. Food Truck Fridays, is that 100% paid for by CROA?
It makes a little bit, right?
Makes a little bit of money.
Makes some money.
We work with the
It is a
organizers,
plus.
so yeah.
Okay, then I don't want to give it away, never mind.
So, but part of the challenge I found reading this budget and then the income budget is putting them together. Because Food Truck Friday shows $11,000 of expense, but is there not a real profit there? Because there's income?
It's in the income.
Yeah, but,
the detailed income.
but to
line.
put these together for us to see
So
them.
if
Where would
you
we
all
find
want to
that
get
detailed
deeper
income?
into the weeds, we can give you the individual worksheets for each one of
No,
these
no, no, no,
events.
just, I was trying to do a cut and paste and put these together to say that, I mean, where are those that make profit?
Right. Well,
Say-
it's
I mean,
going
just
to
so
be
that
much
we-
easier instead of doing that to just look at each one of the individual worksheets, if that's what you all want to do.
No,
I don't believe these are where we should be looking for profits. I believe these are the things that make celebration special.
Celebration.
Right.
So, if,
Forget about the income, just give it its money to make this work.
I mean, I'd love for any of them to get as much income as it can, but at the end of the day, this is the reason you live here.
I'd like to
And
see
you
that.
put up with convoluted bike lanes and other kind of crap that goes with just living in town, but
I'd like to see that 24 added in and considered in our budget.
I would agree
What,
with you.
you'd like to see the 24 added back in? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to Posh Pooch? Is that?
It's not a CROA.
It's a CCS.
It's a CCS funded event.
And if I can,
But a serious question, was the 24 real, or was it a negotiated number expecting it was going to be struck down some?
no, that is, if we kept everything that we wanted.
That was your
It is our thought that the community, when we put like the concerts in and the movies and whatnot down at Lakeside, that's been a big hit. Staff has created the Aloha Summer event, but we're also talking about putting another, because Aloha, living in Hawaii, aloha means hello and goodbye. So we wanted to add like both ends of the summer.
So JR, if we added the 24,000, is this something where you are convinced we've got the bandwidth with the committee, the volunteers, and the staff, and what you've got to do here?
That's a good question.
Yeah, what PJ said, the traditional events, they're not events that we're going to touch, but everything we've done in here to build the budgets is to make sure that we put on a quality event, but it's that extra for several of the events that is where we started picking the budgets apart and cutting and pulling back. Now, we didn't pull back enough where you'd go to the event and kind of like, this isn't like last year. But it's to add that.
So my question for the board is not, is we should add the amount of money that staff and the committee has the bandwidth to do well. And if that real number is not 24, but it's 11, but then you've got an extra 11, and we have all the bandwidth to do it well, and it's a positive, strong item for the community, that is the number I'd be interested in.
And I don't want to see anybody taking money out of their own pockets.
I don't like that either.
I don't like that.
Well, and the only reason I mention it is because it's the unspoken contribution that a lot of boards don't realize.
So, and that's fully understood. So we're saying how much money Dury or PJ or whoever is the real amount of money that would take care of that problem, deal with bandwidth properly so that we're positive.
Well, the amount of money that we have budgeted, again,
Could you come up so we could hear? I'm sorry.
In the resolution, basically, we were supposed to work within the budget that was given to us. If we have X amount of dollars that the board gives to us, we take that and divide it amongst these events. We start with the traditional events, and if there's anything left over, we will add an event. We have not really been able to add any events for 2 years, except we are adding the concert in December. In doing so, in order to enhance that, yes, we have already written checks and ordered things out of our own pockets, because that's all the money, we don't have the money available. But if you want to sign your name to something, if I'm going to put my name on something, I'm going to make it magical. I'll make it the best that we can. And that's what this committee has done over the past 2-3 years. So the fact is that what you have given us is what we use for those events that you see listed. If we want to do anything else or enhance that, we would need more funding. And then I think that's up to the board, if you want to add more events, as to what you want to give. Whatever you give, if it's 11,000, we'll be able to make a great event. If you want 24,000, whatever is added to that will help us not have to go into our own pockets to enhance the events, and we could add events, additional events.
I think the right way to do this then is for me to give JR direction to go back, work with Dory and PJ and the committee to redo all of those budgets and then see what that number looks like then.
So it would be this item, so when you say all those budgets, it's these events right here that add up to the 134.
Correct.
I would be happy, on behalf of the board, to say, go back, make sure you've got the bandwidth. We're not asking you to take money out of your pocket. We want to do what we can do well. We don't want to stretch and then do things non-well. You know what I'm trying to say in English. And if that number is 139 or 146 or whatever it is, then come back and let us know. Is that fair, board?
So,
That would be
absolutely.
wonderful.
And do good quality, make sure it's within the capabilities, but also add that magical piece that you talked about.
Okay.
But it needs to be within
That would be,
the bandwidth of both the committee and JR and the team here.
Right.
that would be very helpful and beneficial.
And the only other thing I like is, what is the board's feelings about Founder's Day moving forward?
What you described?
The committee as a whole, and I think staff agrees, I don't want to speak for Dare, but I think we've had that conversation.
And I think
That every 5 years.
Susan, I think, looked it up, right?
Can you elaborate on what your plans are for 5-year versus dog-year?
Well, in past Founder Days that were blowouts, we had, we had the concert, we had a picnic, we had a parade, okay? We also had fireworks, we also had bounce houses for the kids, we had different events all day long. So it was like a Friday, Saturday, 2-day.
Weren't we putting 20,000 a year for 5 consecutive years in the CJC bucket, so you had a $100,000 budget for your
That's
blowout?
what I recall.
That's not
We have 20 in this budget.
It's not a CCS function.
So just for a refresher, you remember we put 20,000 a year in the CJC bucket, so it's kind of amortized and grows.
But that's not able to be used
No,
for
that's,
just
you're talking about
That's
the
for
CCS budget.
CCS.
That's for all of their
Yes, yeah, you're
activities.
right.
That's not.
That's a CCS, yeah, that's CCS.
This shows 39.9, $40,000 for Founder's Day. That's the most. What's happening?
Well, what we'd like to do, this is what, and I think maybe Steve, you can jump in too, but what we wanted to do and what we said over the years is on the big years, we already had 20, so 25, 30, 35, but to take the funding that is put in there for next year, not to use it
Carrying it
totally,
over for the
carry it
following year.
over
Got
for
it.
the big one. And so that, and I think Steve or Susan said that there is a way to legally go in there evidently.
keep it.
And put a line item those fundings for those 4 years will be moved to the 5th year and the anniversary.
So you're talking about
I never know how
40,000,
we count in celebration. When's the 25th? When are we going to celebrate that?
There's so many of them.
This
We're
is
counting from 96.
Why
not just
but
put it into your-
Foundation counts differently.
This is 22 this year.
It's 22, so we got 3 years to the big one. So I'm a little confused, as usual. Is this 39.9 that's in the budget not really going to be spent for Founder's Day, all
Well,
of it?
this is, we have to be, I think, board approved. I mean, that's our recommendation as a committee, to take, you take a portion of it.
How
You
much
take-
for
You
19?
take a portion of it for the, if you want a concert and a picnic, and it can be on one day, and the parade, and whatever else is included. But you make it a one-day event instead of a two-day event, and then you take a portion of the.
JR, the line item that we have for Founder's Day this year, $39,930, is that the actual cost for running the event?
This is an actual
2019?
cost for running a two-day event like we're running this year.
In 2019?
Correct. And what the committee had asked if we can do, we would still run a Founder's Day, we would still do the parade, the veteran ceremony, the town picnic next year, but to take a portion of what is budgeted for next year and to put it into, I'll call it a reserve fund towards the 25th anniversary. But this budget, this number here reflects a traditional Friday, Saturday like what we're doing this year.
So if we do it like we've always done it, this is what it's gonna cost.
It sounds like this is a result of the committee not actually able to get the money that they've needed every year, and now they're stocking it away until
Well, past boards
And I
have
don't
been
blame
very
them.
strict on how much we're gonna budget for special events.
I get that, I don't blame them.
Can I
hope
ask you a
that
question?
See a
then?
difference.
That's
What
exactly
is the
right.
possibility of this rolling the 5-year event into the capital improvement fund?
I think that
Is it
that's
amended?
exactly the way. I wouldn't do it to where we budget for an event and then water down the event and just say,
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it that way. I would just budget, I would take
think-
out of your surplus.
I think it's a horrible idea to have an expense that we just don't spend.
Right.
So if we want to have a surplus allocation, have a surplus allocation. Take the 39,930, figure out what the real expense is, allocate the rest of it to where it's needed, and we may find out the 134 without that piggy bank allows you to do
This-
everything you wanted to do.
This is the real expense.
This
But
is
we're
the
not-
real
what we're
I just
saying is
heard two
don't.
different
Yeah, but
answers.
what we're saying is, why would we water down the event? It's a traditional event. If you do it halfway next year,
Don't water it.
people are going to complain. They're not going to like that. So
Don't.
just fund it this way, and then in 5 years, when it's time to do the blowout, fund the blowout. That's the
Exactly.
way you got to do it.
That's fine too. That works.
But find a different place to start putting some money away, or just, maybe that's just the
highly
surplus.
recommend against watering down your events
Don't
to
water
save
anything
money.
down.
Water down.
Yeah.
If we want to.
But that's where we have the surplus.
If we have surplus, if we decide that we want to allocate part of the surplus to a liability for the future, we can do that. That's a board decision, that's easy.
It's a little unnerving to realize that you all are gaming the system because you're nice people. I got to say that it sends a couple of messages. One is, you better be rich to be on that committee.
That's what I don't like
And
about
I don't like that at all. And secondly, it says you got to know inside baseball to know how to game this process so that you can get the money you need where you need it. And I think this board is saying very clearly that we don't want to behave that way. We don't want that. We want you to tell us what it really costs and put it out there, and then we'll live with it or not live with it. I think.
But I just want to make sure we're clear, though. Management is operating off of the budgets that the board has approved for us. We're not saying we're going to skim
I was going to say, what it really
based
says
on what we're approved.
is maybe past boards have not been as transparent.
Give them the money. If you want to spend it, give them the money.
You think?
No, but I think there's something else. This board made it clear 3 or 4 months ago, come back with your dreams, and we're not seeing those yet.
Well, then we,
so
at our
go-
meeting, then it was said, well, pick 3 things that you want to cut.
Come
And
back
we're
with
like,
your, I think this board meant, come back with your dreams, and we still need to see that.
I mean,
Is
one
that
of
a
the
fair
things that's
statement?
not on here
Huh?
is 4th of July. I mean, you've got a $2,800 expense. I don't know. I mean, we had this discussion last year at the 4th of July, and I don't know what's going to happen and where we're going with that, but it makes me uneasy to see
But
such a
that's-
small
that's
line item.
not
We
Is
did
that
not
I'd rather
budget
see it-
for a full 4th of July event because we've been told by Lexington that they are running the 4th of July event. But we have a budget prepared for it if they don't.
Time out. Lexington's word right now when it comes to 4th of July means nothing because it was back and forth this year. And I'm not about to let celebration in the community that I'm proud of and live in be shot down on 4th of July again. Not gonna happen. So, I'm sorry, but not gonna happen. Let's figure out how we can make sure we're planning ahead, because that was a conversation this year, was we can't do it this year, but we will plan ahead for next year. And I want to make sure that we plan ahead.
We have a budget ready to go for the board to approve if we need to do a 4th of July event as CROA. Remember the vote and how it turned out this year. It was ready, the event
Thanks
was
for that
ready.
reminder, Steve.
With everything, but it
I'm
was
sorry, but I
last
mean,
minute,
that's-
it was, we didn't know, we weren't budgeted, when budget season comes out, we'll discuss it.
I
That's
think
where I'm coming from.
to support Kevin, I agree, let's get 4th of July in there. Because in fairness to your staff and your people, you need to say, this is the events. Which is why I'm saying, don't put things in here unless we're willing to support them. Because I don't, it's not fair to say we can increase this to $300,000 and then find out we're not gonna have anyone to staff it, no one's gonna be here, and we're not gonna do it. So, you know, if we're gonna do the 4th of July as an example, then people have got to be able to plan for the vacations and everything like that, and we gotta say, does it work and what are the priorities? So, and if we don't, and if Lexington funds it,
This is
great.
planning time.
That would be gravy, and we've got a little excess money.
Exactly.
The only other thing I would comment on about bringing you our dream budget is these events don't just materialize around the conference room in a 1.5-hour monthly meeting. They take a lot of research, a lot of planning, a lot of time spent gathering the do's and don'ts and the plus and minuses of other communities who have held similar events, how they can be tailored to our community from a facility standpoint, from a budget standpoint, and that's why I don't have a problem, and I'm sure Gary doesn't
And that
either.
is why we are telling you, give us one budget that is
Okay.
what you want, that has the bandwidth all the way across that side of the table.
We got
so
it.
that we can sit here and say, this is the one we're willing to commit to, and if you got a plan in advance, well, fine, now it's in a budget, you got a time frame for next year.
Yeah, and I guess that's where we're coming from. If we're going to all this trouble to bring that to you, it's very
If we were gonna shoot you
disheartening.
down-
Don't ask us
if we
to
were
do
gonna-
that and then shoot
Their
us
hands
down
have been
and cut it in
slapped
half
multiple
because
times, and
we're
they're
all
starting to put in their hands
DJ,
up.
you've been here all day, we're saying do it.
Has there been any part of what we've said that doesn't look like we're serious about this?
But the caution is, we're turning this around within a week.
Yeah, you
He's
can,
already
as much
done.
time as you want, but we'd like to have it by like the end of the day tomorrow or Wednesday.
But I know
Way too late.
you've already had these discussions.
Yeah, but let me ask you, is there any way you guys can just do?
Yeah, our meeting's tomorrow, actually.
Oh, okay, good.
Perfect.
That's
What time?
I drew up you say that, so we planned ahead, so we'll be meeting tomorrow.
Good.
Thank you. I think we're
Great job, JR. Really.
I don't, that's it,
Where
sorry.
were-
I mean, there's no other big ticket items for Parks and Recreation. I mean, the other, the other thing I would like to talk to you about is, under Recreation, we moved items out that used to all be in this sum of dollars, but they're really pay-for-play events. Summer camps are pay-for-play, our kids' night out programs are pay-for-play. The only program that's not pay-for-play fully right now is our chorus program. And we originally budgeted it last year to be pay-for-play, where residents and non-residents would pay to be part of this program. And then the board, after some presentations, changed it to where it was a reduction in what we were charging. So we budgeted it again this year to charge, to help offset more of the expenses that come along with it, because it's closer to a pay-for-play program. We had to get from you all, do you think that it's a community enhancement, kind of like a special event, because they do some free concerts? Or do you think it's a program where they should pay to participate in it? And I don't even think what we're charging right now fully covers it, right? It's
No,
it's
this
about-
year was $10 for the year for a resident, 20 for non-resident. Next year, we had budgeted for per session, so the spring session, winter session.
Right. But what I'm asking you is, what
It
we
still
put in the
doesn't cover it.
2019 still doesn't
No.
fully cover it. It's closer to what, 75%?
Probably 65, 70.
And who's paying?
The people that actually sign up to be in the chorus
The
program.
people who are volunteering to be in the chorus pay
They pay $10 for resident and 20 for
to
non-resident.
be in the chorus?
Well, it's the same as an activity.
It's an activity.
And they're turning around and giving us concerts?
had that discussion last.
And they're giving us
It was-
concerts?
It's an enrichment
We're paying
program.
For the head of the program, what's the guy's name?
Chris.
We're also-
Chris Shape.
It wasn't
and we're-
much money.
And we're paying a lot of money for music and stuff like that, music rights.
We don't have a problem either way. We just want to know what the philosophy of the board is, because last year it kind of switched throughout the year. And we want to make sure that we're getting one direction moving forward here. We can budget the same way that we are this year. You're going to subsidize it partially because you find value in what that program brings to the community with those free concerts, or you're going to look at it and say it's an enrichment program, you should pay to participate in it.
I think it's a tremendous asset for our community.
They do great concerts.
I think
They're
it's a
free
tremendous
concerts.
asset.
They're during holidays, but they're learning how to sing and they're learning how to perform at a
Good
higher
for them.
level.
What other activities would you put on the same level? So chorus, would you put it on the same as
Yeah, we looked at that because we're
any,
paying
you
for
know
soccer
what I
and other
mean?
things.
Soccer or any other activity that we have? Would you put it on the same level?
And it's
And if so,
yeah.
how is that?
In other Parks and Recreation entities, I would say that chorus would be something that you're learning how to sing, you're learning how to perform in front of groups of people, and you're probably going to pay a fee to do it to offset the costs that come along with it. You have to decide, is it a program that we find value in that the entire community subsidizes so that we can have this chorus program? That's really the ultimate answer.
But you went through this with last year's budget, and if we have a process and it works, I would not change it.
Yeah, and
Let's
leave it.
not just
Let's leave
start
it.
spending money willy-nilly. If we
Let's
have
leave it.
something, it works.
Leave it and move on.
Leave it and move on.
so we'll have to rewrite that one then to go back.
Yeah, it's a small amount.
Yep, okay. From the Parks and Recreation standpoint then, that's really the only big ticket items that we have to talk about. The rest are park monitors, level of service, which you already gave us the level of service, what you wanted. This is what it costs for that level of service.
So here's the question. I remember the board a year ago asked for an increase in level of service,
And that's what we're budgeting for.
but I don't see an increase from the prior year, from 17 to 18 or 18 to 19.
Well, the total amount of dollars that we budgeted for did include, when we wrote this budget last year, that was approved, was that till midnight on Friday and Saturday. And during your level of service budget meeting, you didn't ask us to increase it any further than that.
So now that we're going to have a new facility that we're monitoring, if we're going to maintain the same level of service in the community, don't we need more hours to cover the new amenity?
We have a plan that we've been working on of our park staff being able to work out there, and we have.
And maintain the same level of service everywhere else?
Yes. Because they'll be permanently stationed at the Civic Corridor during those hours.
I have one question to tie back to the level service to midnight that we have on Fridays and Saturdays. It's been a full year now since we've done that. We have access to the codes. Can we see that it's actually being used? That key cards are being scanned and people are there to make sure, like, we should have the data to know if it's worth continuing that expense.
Can we see whether or not people are actually
Yeah.
going to the pool? We can look at that.
I mean, we've given it a year. Let's see. Is it worth it or is it a waste of money?
Yeah, good point. We'll look at that. Okay. Any other questions from Parks and Recreation standpoint? All right, we'll get into the real meat then, the operations, landscaping, electricity, water. So we'll ask Todd to come up.
We're going to have a reset, we are going to have to, for tape purposes, recess at 3:10. Do you want to do one now? You want to do 5 minutes now?
5 minutes now.
Let's do 5 minutes now, and then we'll have to come back. So we're at pretty good time shape. We're at the 2 o'clock thing. So let's resume at 2:15 sharp, 7 minutes. Thank you, Patrick.
Fluid break.
Fluid break.
Landscape.
We're live. We're resuming. It's now 2:17. We're going to 5 o'clock, the maximum. And it's back to maintenance, landscaping, electric, and water. Steve, Todd.
So if you can turn your attention to page 67, and then I'll turn it over to Todd because he's really good at this.
All right, so page 67 is the landscape. I know Brian had some questions about landscape. Most of the numbers there are all set in stone with the landscape contract that we have. Where the additional came from was adjusted passive parks, I believe it was. No, it was the dog park increased by $3,000 a year, and as well as then we added on the athletic field. So you have your contract number amounts, and then you have additionals, which is about $6,000 per line item, and that's to cover irrigation repairs and the miscellaneous grass replacement or plants that had died off for some odd reason that are not worth going to reserves to replace.
How do we turn the 797, 676 into something that we can monitor, though? Specifically, what I'm talking about is we go to board meetings and we get a request for $26,418 to replace sod. And I would like, what I'm asking the board to consider is that we turn 797 into the spreadsheet I talked about. It could have Lakeside, North Village, Spring Park, blah, 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 going across. But then it goes down and it's like, okay, replace sod or, fix pavilion or do this or that. Somehow so that we can sit here and kind of take, because it's impossible to take this 797 number and figure out what it really is.
Well,
And part of it,
true, that number though is for operating. You still have your reserve landscape numbers, and that's where we can go through and be specific about, okay, this park's next to be renovated and this park follows, or this athletic field needs to be done, like Spring Park or whatever. But
so when you
these
say
numbers are
operating, the 797 is strictly paid to the outside vendor then?
Yes.
For Yellowstone?
So you have, so there's another sheet when you really talk about the sausage being made that Todd says, here's the contract amount. And it says, this is what we're supposed to pay Yellowstone when they meet the scope of the services.
Right.
Then he adds a little bit more for anything out of scope, that he's doing his best job of forecasting the future for plants that may die that aren't Yellowstone's fault, those kind of things. Mm-hmm. What you talked about, the $30,000 to replace the Great Lawn, is that what we're talking about? That was a replacement reserve. That was a scheduled replacement for sod. So not out of this pool of money. Different pool altogether. So these dollars that are being spent here are directly related to maintenance and landscaping costs.
So I have a question with that. I'm sorry. I look at the sports fields K through 8. The second highest number, $124,000 a year. That's not just, what is that for? That's for this yard right here?
No, that's sports fields would be the East Village field, Spring Park field.
It says K8.
Yeah, that's just in parentheses, the K-8 fields
Right.
too, but it's all the
So it's
fields.
more than
And the
just
baseball
K-8.
fields, yes,
Okay, that's
absolutely.
why
Oh, I thought it was just here.
And that's your routine
Same
maintenance
question I
contract.
had.
Okay.
Routine maintenance contract plus irrigation that may fail. There's always, a head getting broken or a valve being, needing replaced. So that covers all of those things.
Does that include the lighting here too?
Not under this category.
That's electricity.
I want to go back to Brian's question, because I'm having the same problem, which is that I see requests for expenditures, and I get what you said earlier today, Steve, about if it's in the budget, you just approve it because it's been approved. It is such a big number that we're working with, and it now comes from two different categories, the operational fee here and the reserve replacement fee. And it's got a lot of moving pieces because it's going to a lot of different places. So that we're constantly, it seems like every board meeting we've had some request to spend money for landscaping.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow, there needs to be a mechanism that lets us be able to take the 360-degree view of this without getting so deeply into the minutia that we spend a lot of time, but our board meetings would go faster if we could just see more than a few days in advance that there's a $100,000 expense rolling up on us.
Jackson, I think the best way for us to fix this is for us to do the September or October workshop where you
Right.
all see the capital, the replacement reserves expenditures, because if Todd has an out-of-scope job that needs to be done, and it's $4,999 or less, you're not seeing it anyways. It's part of the contract. I'm just approving it and moving it forward. And Susan and Todd are signing off on the regular contract for landscape, because once you approve that, that's just an expenditure that's being made for that contract. You're seeing the capital items, and you guys need to get a better picture, because the last board saw the full year, so you need to get a better picture of it. We're gonna do one in the next month, and then we're doing another one in April when we bring the new board in.
So-
And I think that solves this problem.
And where the disconnect has been is you come in as a new board in April, and we sent you the PowerPoint, but it doesn't mean anything to you because you're just being bombarded. And so rather than do the update of what we're going to spend monies on, capital monies on in the next 12 months in January or December, we're going to move that to April. So the new board will be presented with the next year through March of the next year, so that we then are on a fiscal year with the board. That's it.
Well, the key to this,
I actually do
there
my
you go.
homework.
The key to this GL line item, yeah. The key to this GL line item, and Gary Hudspeth will give me a high five for this. This is all about contract management. This is making sure that the contractor does what the scope of the contract says they're supposed to do, and then we pay them accordingly. And everything moves along the way it's supposed to. If they're not doing what they're supposed to do, though, we have to hold them accountable. We have to hire another contractor to come in and clean them
That's
up,
where our grading
and then
system comes
bill
in.
them back and those types of things. So that's the scorecard.
So to go back to the big picture then,
Yeah.
is this, Todd, is this enough money to make Celebration Landscaping an A-plus community? Or is this just average for a nice residential subdivision?
No, it's to make it an A+, first class appearance. That's where we're.
Because that's
goal.
what your
That's
scope.
what the scope says.
That's what the scope says. But
And that's what we
there's
force
two
them to
different
do.
questions though, Jackson. The real question here
The
is,
money's there.
can you get a landscape company that will actually do the work of the scope? And that's what everybody that we work with in this industry struggles with. Everyone says they can. It's $1 million formula. If you could come up with a landscape company that can get the vision nailed down into the guys' heads that or girls' heads that are out there doing the actual work and not running over sprinkler heads and damaging buildings and those kind of things, that would be huge. That's key.
Does the K-8 numbers include any maintenance, or any of these costs around those, the old tennis courts, the abandoned courts? Did we do anything around those now?
Just the grass and the hedge on the outside of the fence.
Okay.
The rest of it's cool. Now, if you fix them all up and put stuff in there, then it becomes our expense.
Right. Under
Well, we're
maintenance.
doing it now anyway.
On the
Right?
outside of the fence.
Just the landscape maintenance.
So
On
almost
the
half,
outside.
So this budget is about $50,000 over last year's.
Yes.
What does that reflect? Is it higher labor cost, higher material
Athletic
cost?
field, if you look,
34,
if you look at
35.
athletic field, complex lot D, 35,000 right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the biggest chunk. And then, like I said, I raised a small portion for the dog park because it's the doggies are tearing up the grass a little more than we expected from last year's budget. So we had to account for that.
What was last year's for the dog park, just out of curiosity?
Let's see.
I don't think
I
you have.
don't
It's on
know.
one of those.
I don't have
It's
that.
on one of the sausage worksheets.
It's
Because I made a note of the expense of that on my notes here.
I can look it up
Curious.
real quick if you want.
How much of the 797 is Yellowstone?
how much of it is what?
all of it.
Yellowstone.
All of it?
All of it.
All of it.
Well, it's for
Including-
contract and out of contract work.
Well, wait, so how much, so none of this is service area then?
We are in
No,
the-
service areas are paid for out of service area budgets.
Yep. This is all Yellowstone.
This is 100% Yellowstone.
Yes,
Yes.
Unless we would go out and get a different contractor to do an irrigation repair or do a landscape install or something like
Is
that.
the dog park Yellowstone?
Yes, it's
Okay. Almost half of this is for passive parks.
correct. Yeah, it's broken up into, well, the villages basically, and then the dog park and then the new athletic field complex.
So Kevin, can you repeat your question? You asked about
I was
last
just
year.
curious, last year's expense for the dog park.
What did we do last year for the dog park?
Yeah, it's
Um,
27 this year.
We had 20,000 last year for
So
the
it went
dog
up by
park.
6, okay.
$20,592.
And Artisan is not in here, other than there's some passive parks, I'm sure, that are in Artisan.
Yes.
Correct.
But all of the parks in Artisan are covered through the Artisan Park Committee, and they're
Only the pool and the field across the street are covered in. The other parks are CROA parks.
So the amphitheater is a passive park?
Yes, that's considered passive.
Okay. And when we bring on the ball fields, at some point in 2019?
19.
19, right? What happens to this line item? I mean, not the line item, but to this category?
You see it, it's starting
It's in
in
there.
April, it's there.
The
That's the
athletic
very
field
last
complex, Lot D, is that what we're talking
Right.
about? So we're talking $3,800 a month to just, that's just normal maintenance of those fields?
Yeah, that's for the maintenance of the fields and the landscape.
Seems low.
And it's an actual number that Yellowstone had provided us a proposal for.
So they made a proposal to do it?
Yes, they did.
Based off of the architectural plans, right?
Right, based off the
So
plans.
it's for maintaining 2 of the fields,
Two of the
and then the
fields.
synthetic field?
No, not the
And I know there's
synthetic
no
field.
grass cutting there.
But it would be the turf around it, the hedge, around the fence line, the parking lot, all of that good stuff.
Okay.
Just seems low.
It seems low
Don't
considering
tell
the
them
cost of
that.
rock
Well, in comparison to other.
We gave them the
Some other things
landscape
here,
plans, and we asked them to give us a quote for it, and this is what they came back with.
long
Now,
as they
don't be
sign for
surprised
it.
if they come back, it's not part of their contract, it's a separate one. Don't be surprised if they come back and after next year and say,
Yeah,
it
that's
costs
Say
us
Kevin
more.
said it was
Steve,
low.
I know you have Lot D in here too. That's for mowing Lot D is right.
Did you ask them
Lot
to
D's
mow
in
Lot D
there.
too?
No,
Just
that,
seems
I
very
think it's
low.
along the road there, just that piece along the road.
Okay, well, because we're going to talk about Lot D's grass.
Yeah.
The hay grass at the September meeting.
Oh, okay.
Should we know now?
Well, I sent you that email.
It's a change order for doing Lot D and clearing it out and putting the hay
Part of the
seed down.
contingency.
Would it?
Yeah,
be
it's part of that
beneficial
contingency
Arnco?
dollars.
Arnco?
to Get that number?
Yeah, yep.
But then, do we have something in the budget for mowing that?
Yeah.
To mow Lot D, once they put the,
there'll be enough money in the budget to do that, yes, without giving up other things.
And you want to do that before all the construction and everything is?
that, it'll be part of their overall construction plan. They'll figure it, once
So
you
that'll
approve
be-
the change order, they'll just put it into their overall plan.
So we'll discuss that at the September meeting.
Yes, because they're gonna need an answer this month, because they need to do it as part of what they're doing right now.
What about road maintenance going into, what,
The road's really gonna be more of a capital, part of the reserve replacement items. If there's any little tiny potholes and stuff, we can find the little bit of money it takes to fill those in.
Well, and also in looking at, from a capital standpoint, when we decided to go with reserve advisors to do our reserve study, I asked them, please don't schedule it before April, because I want them to be able to see the facility so that they can build it into their,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
whatever they do.
Anything else with landscaping then?
Well, I just want to say, probably after events, the number one thing that I hear from people is about landscaping. So I know that this is an area where, geez, we've gotten wrapped around the axle a couple times already with individual residents who are concerned about a particular landscaping issue in their home. I would like to just hear the same thing from you that we heard from the events committee and JR, which is that you have the resources that you need in terms of staff and materials and dollars to do the job at the service level that we've requested. And this is your chance, Todd. It's either speak now or we're going to hold your feet to the fire for the next
I won't even
12
look at
months.
them. I'll let
No,
them answer it on
you
it.
can hold my feet to the fire. I mean, the funds that we approved, or y'all approved here, the $100,000 plant infill is to get us to that first-class level. The little extras like the Great Lawn, that was a necessary item to make sure, it looks great for the Great Lawn. But no, I'll stake my name on this. As long as we hold Yellowstone accountable for their contract, which, covers everything, and I've built in the little extras for the irrigation of the plants, I'm very confident in this budget.
So there's no
So
question
at
on this.
2:30 on the video, he said.
Folks, we can't promise you that Yellowstone's going to do what they're supposed to do all the
Right.
time, but we can promise you that we will hold them accountable.
We do.
We will manage that contract. and
That's
we'll-
my question, is how have they been doing it?
They've improved. They've improved real well. We've had more meetings. Well, I had Susan in with one of them to give a little more oomph to the whole cause, but they've been doing good. They've improved. But if I wasn't here, or we weren't here, they probably wouldn't be improved as much as they are, because they're like any landscaper. You just have to keep after them, and they put out fires here and there. But our whole goal is to manage the whole contract and not just one little park or one little weed here and there.
Which is indicative of any contract that you have. If you put it up on the shelf and you ignore it, the contractor's probably going to take advantage of that.
Well, the one thing I will say about Yellowstone that I experienced something totally different with Davy is when we bring something that needs to be brought up to, the standard needs to be brought up, they do have a plan, they do acknowledge that there's a problem, there's no excuses. I mean, there may be, we've got, whatever, we were putting out a fire over here. But they're dealing with a living, breathing asset of celebrations. And so they've been very accountable to the fact of any deficiencies, and they've been pretty quick about getting plans in place to rectify it.
So I want to take this a step beyond Jackson's, and this goes to holding your feet to the fire. If we're really looking at a first-class facility, and then they're responsive to oversight inquiries or complaints, do you have the resources to do that oversight? And to ideally that they will learn from that oversight so that they're not going to mess up again?
What, keep repeating it? I would say
what do you need? I mean, that
at this
we're relying a lot on you.
Oh, yes. Yes, you are. But that's okay. Currently, the way the contract is going and the level of service they're providing, it's what the timeframes I have to involve it is sufficient. If the contract would start to falter and they wouldn't have the right personnel on site, that may all change, because it might take two of me out there to keep it under control. But currently, it's we're good.
Todd's had an opportunity recently too, though, to kind of get the right people on his team and move his team in the right direction. So he's he had an opening for a key position, and he was able to hire the right person. So I think that
So it's moving.
Yeah, I think that we've got the right formula. Again, I think you all have asked me this before, and I told you, if I needed more staff to meet the level of service that you're asking for, I would bring back a case to you for having more staff. I don't feel like we're there at this point in time. And when I talk to the department heads during our leadership team meetings, we have these conversations. If we need more, let's have a solid case to justify why we need more. It can't be an emotional case, we're just too busy, and we have to show some data of why we need it.
Okay. Two last things. One is going back to that first-class standard and looking at passive parks.
Yes.
Do you think that they are there?
No, I would say they're not there yet. Just little things here and there.
Okay.
Mole crickets popped up over the summertime and threw them for a little loop. It takes time to recover from that, but it's nature, so you're going to have those little hiccups. Weed control, they've gotten much better at. They've got implemented more people to control that. If you take Reserve Park up in North Village, it used to be lots of weeds, and it's greatly improved. So a weed here and there is not going to kill us as long as we're on top of them.
Yeah, and so this contract started, what, January 1?
It did.
So I know there's probably still just a little bit of catch-up.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So then the other question, I don't know if this is part of this budget piece, but you mentioned the term irrigation.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there was some discussion from Susan maybe in March when we did the drive around about irrigation. Is this the place for looking at irrigation and cost savings or not? I know it's not a monthly expense, but.
Right. No, there's a couple of different categories that we have in the reserves for irrigation improvements. This irrigation I'm talking about is a valve that gets broken or, hit by lightning,
okay.
or
Yeah,
sprinkler
I'm not-
heads that are
I'm
busted.
talking about some more
things like
major
that.
infrastructure. That's a
Right.
separate discussion.
Correct.
Okay.
I just want to add one more thing. We have, a great example is Pennyroyal Park. We just resodded the entire park, and I think at a board meeting, I made a comment of how, in my 4 years being here, it looks better than it's ever been. There's been consistent problems there. Well, in a week's time, and not because Yellowstone didn't do their job, it is having some major symptomatic problems of what we've been seeing in the past with brand new sod. And Todd and I have walked it, the experts have walked it. We just cannot diagnose what that problem is. It doesn't mean that Todd's terrible at his job or that Yellowstone's terrible at their job. Susan said it, we are talking about living, breathing organisms that have multiple variables that can kill grass. And we got to figure out the real problem and fix it to where it doesn't keep happening. Because brand new sod, which we're not paying for the
Right.
replacement of that brand new sod. It wasn't, we asked them to make sure that it looks, it's dumb, but they have to figure out what it is. Is it the nematodes? Is it the, whatever those crazy little bugs and weather and irrigation that's causing these problems?
It's like day and night, at some parks.
But the homeowners will tell you, everyone's terrible, nothing's working, and we just replaced it. It looked green and plush, and everything was wonderful, and now it's got a huge dead spot right in the middle of it. And it was a matter of a week with plenty of rain, plenty of water going on.
Can we change the narrative comment so up front it says this is 100% Yellowstone expense? So as we read it, we know that.
But one other.
And
go
if
ahead.
we hit a point where we had to kick in $7,500 to help pay for something, that additional expense would go here. So our budget would be $795.7, and our actual would be $802, right? So anything with Yellowstone is going to show up right here.
One of the things that Todd had asked for that we talked with Steve about is that it would be nice to see the contract amount, Yellowstone, the additionals, we're going to call it irrigation and new plant material in another line item, and then our sports fields, so you can really see, differentiate out what we're spending the money on. They'd all be Yellowstone items, so we're working on that with corporate.
Yeah, I think that would be good. I mean, if we're paying Yellowstone $800,000 a year, that scenario I just drew out, I think that's where the actual should go. I mean,
Right.
basically we have two expenses. We have Yellowstone or we have reserve replacement, is what you're saying.
For landscape, yes.
For landscape.
For landscape, yes.
Yes.
Movement service area.
Yeah, and you can see on here our year-to-date actual, so I'm kind of scrolling over it for 2018. We didn't put in forecasts for August through December, but it's probably consistent with what we have because we want to spend the contract dollars. I mean, that's.
Well, doesn't this include, like in June, where we got 127/62? That's not all Yellowstone, though. Doesn't that include invoices from the prior? So, to me, we really ought to have Yellowstone as a category, and then we ought to have Davies. Because you could sit here and you could, at the end of the year, when the 754 budget is coming in at 856,000, Jackson will not remember that. He'll be screaming about Yellowstone. So I mean, it's really, so it'd be good to see Yellowstone's budget and actual, and then.
I resemble that.
Well, but it will, and no one will remember. It is a fair.
Saying that we're over in June because we paid Dave.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I mean,
So-
let's have the clarity so that we can do our job as best.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Susan provides a variance report in every board packet, and in that variance report, it should say,
Davy
we're
invoices.
over for June because of Davy invoices. Now, if you want a summary page where it's in one spot, but I mean, the variance though does talk about the difference in the expenditures in those lines.
If it's a couple 100,000, we'll probably talk about it more than
We'll
once.
probably catch on.
Well, it's in there, right? So, okay.
Good.
All right, so we're gonna just kind of scroll on down. The pool maintenance is done through contracts. Are there any questions with pool maintenance?
No.
Okay. So I'll let Todd talk a little bit about maintenance facilities and why he budgeted what he did here.
Well, okay.
So the 6661.
Can we go back to pools for a minute?
Sure.
So pools is, you have them under contract for the maintenance of it. You have site assessment maintenance through CES. They're the ones that come through and check all the equipment, make sure all the chemical feeders are working properly, and into checks and balances to make sure the pool cleaning service company is doing everything they can do to make sure the water's level and balanced properly. So that's safeguards. And then you have chemical usage, which we track and use variables through the years to make sure there's no jumps and no chemicals disappearing down the street or anything like that. And it's also based on usage. We've seen a higher increase of pool users at North Village, as well as Spring Park, because the pool is being cooled there, as well as Lakeside. So, and it's dropped our complaints a lot, so we're happy with the level of pool service that we've had.
Todd, how does that, those proposals from Symbiont Service Corp., how would that affect that?
That hasn't. Those were proposals
They're in the
for
budget, they
future
were in
years.
here, I didn't know why they were in.
Mr.
That's the
Anderson
parking
asked
lot.
us to look at geothermal heaters and pools that aren't heated at this point in time, the things that we could spend money now that would save us money in the long run, and those are parking lot items, those are sitting on the side. They're
Same
too big of
category as irrigation.
expenditures to be in maintenance.
So we're not
operation.
considering them.
Not in maintenance and operation.
It's
We
not
said
in
we can ask
not in
for
the
it.
annual budget.
Okay. If you want to talk about how you want to spend your capital dollars and any surplus that you have, that has to be part of that conversation.
Yeah, that was part of, from 3 or 4 months ago, looking at what can we spend money on today where we invest that saves money in the future. It's like that new irrigation,
Smart
irrigation.
smart irrigation that pays attention to
Right. Oh,
our
yeah,
weather.
right, right.
And the increased pool usage in areas that were stable before, do you know what that's attributable to, or?
Not really. I don't know if it's population or who knows, but we have just seen an increase.
And then if you had a lot of, when we have the closure, that's an expensive process, isn't it? Who covers that? Like,
Sometimes it depends on why the pools are closed down. If it's a code brown, as we call them, that can get expensive because you have to superchlorinate the pools, and that happens 3 or 4 times a year at various pools. So.
Does our
Woke
key
everybody up on that one.
card system track numbers? In other words, can we see how many key card entries have
Yes.
accessed the pool,
Oh, sure.
for example?
Patrick would just love to talk about that later in life, but yes.
So we can see that there
We
were,
know who
it
comes
doesn't
and
say
goes.
how many people have gone in, it says how many times there's been an
Correct.
entry.
Absolutely.
And does it track or not track individuals, so you can see which family key cards went in or not?
Well, it tracks whoever scans their card. We know who's used the card or who owns the card.
I mean, so if a kid is going in and out and in and out and in and out using the same key card, we know that might be.
We would know that that's just one kid playing,
Okay,
going back and
okay.
forth. Yeah, and that.
Yeah, so we do have access
Now,
to
ask us
data.
if we have the resources to go and look up kids going in and out of the pool.
No. So it's trying to get
'Cause I would
a
tell you no.
handle,
Possibilities
trying to
there.
get a handle on usage.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Any more questions about pools? Maintenance-wise, our maintenance budgets are just slightly up from last year. We included, 2,100 on electric.
Dumpsters in the park is the main expenditure of that.
Yeah.
So this goes to that trash contract, and we do have it as an agenda item, but we can just combine it with this. We had a contract with Celebration Sanitation that gave a 1.5 years of no fees for the dumpsters in the park if the contract was renewed early. It was. He actually extended it out to 2 years, because when I was doing 2018's budget, I called him and said, I'd prefer to not only do this for half a year, I'd rather do it for the full year, and he gave it to us with no charge for the full year. So you see it again now in here, and we put it underneath maintenance and facilities. And the reason why we put it under maintenance facilities, is we want this to be part of the apartment recreation fee. We want apartments to share in these costs because they utilize those parks also. So it's an expenditure that's part of their usage, and that's $32,160.
Are we under contract for that?
We're under contract through Celebration Sanitation for the dumpsters in the parks. There's 7 total.
Okay.
So anything else on this one?
When we're talking about maintenance for passive parks, what does that entail?
Maintenance on passive parks. So down at Artisan area, you have, before the amphitheater, you have lights in the trees, and Ashby Park has lights in the trees. It also includes the work on the fountains. So there's plenty of maintenance. That would clean in the park benches, clean in the trash cans, all kinds of things like that.
This is a GL line where we need to forecast those expenses for the year so that we can continue to provide that level of service. But if we can find ways of doing it better, more efficient, more effective, and you can save money, then that's good. As long as that they look good and we can bring this line in lower every month, then that's great. Because they're not really contract-driven numbers. They're just our best guess of what we're going to have to spend.
Most of the things that are done in this broad category are done by your team, is that correct?
The majority of it, yes.
So we don't contract out a lot of things. I mean, the dumpsters are different, but outside of that, most of this is work that your team will do.
We contract out some pressure washing on a large scale because over the past it was cheaper to do it that way. Some painting, depending on the height of what we're painting. Concrete replacements like sidewalks, contract that out. All of those items are in here.
Todd does a lot of analyzing per project, so he may look at it and say, this is right out of our best practices book that we get to take this class, but do we have the resources available? Do we have the tools available? What else am I doing right now that... And if he can do it cheaper, he's always about bringing it to us and saying, I can do it at less cost than contracting out. And then Susan and I will say, do you have the manpower to make sure you're doing everything else and do this? And he'll tell us yes or no. Because if he doesn't and we'll drop level of service somewhere else, we'll tell him, spend the money, contract it out, we got to get it done quickly.
Yes, heard that a few times. I may not always convey my thoughts all that well in a public setting, but my brain is always...
That's why you have me.
Always, well, that's right. My brain's always moving to see where we can do it the most efficient and the highest quality.
Electricity pools.
Yep.
Brian says, moving on.
Did we have a budget blow last year? Is that what happened?
Well, we had a cold winter, and so to heat this building in particular, the 851 building, it cost a whole lot more to heat.
Well, I'm looking at, in 2017, we had...
137.
I mean, we budgeted $8,675 a month every month last year. This year, we're going from 11 up to 13. So we've got an increase from 104 to 151. Our year-to-date actuals this year kind of make sense with what you're budgeting. So I was trying to figure out why you budgeted so low last year.
One of the reasons we were using natural gas to heat some of the pools, we don't, you will look at the natural gas line, it's zeroed out completely now. We're using electricity now to pay to power the geothermal heaters.
Right.
So that's an increase in electricity and a decrease in natural gas.
And the biggest spike was the colder winter.
Yeah,
You'll
and
see
cold.
through May, the numbers were higher because you're always in the rears paying for electricity. So, and it was pretty chilly through April. So the heat in this building, which is electric strips, we all know is very expensive to operate. And then they added the cost of the geothermal at Lakeside.
And then you got $19,000 in new athletic fields that we didn't have in the past. And we're doing our best estimate at that, what it's going to cost to pay for the electricity out there. We have some idea with the LED lighting what that's going to cost, but other than that, we're using our best guesstimate on the LEDs along the trail and the building electricity and those types of things.
And with the dog park, there's, what's the electricity currently?
The cost,
About $50.
Looks like it's $50 a month.
it's not very
if you look
much.
down on-
But there's discussion about about lights at the dog park?
there has been that we've been looking into and getting prices for, which I hope to have on the agenda here this month, but.
But the
if
600
not-
is enough to cover.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely, because we based it on the size of Spring Park, I believe. Well, half of that, because you got 13 lights at Spring Park, and we're looking at 7 in the dog park. So.
Okay.
Do the trail lights, the boardwalk lights in the trails, is that under passive parks?
Those are not.
Those are CDD.
But you will have trail lights on along. You'll
The
have those
boardwalks?
bollards
The
along.
boardwalks are all CDD?
Yes,
They are.
but you'll have those expenses at your new athletic complex because we had to build that trail along the side there to get down to the backfields. So we had to put bollards there. There would be some electric expense.
And is the line item for Spring Park for a pool?
It's for, well, when it's for Spring Park, it's the pool, it's Heritage Hall, it's the geothermal for the pool, and the restroom facilities.
Yeah, this
And
geo
the park,
line,
and the lights within the park.
this geo line isn't just pools. It's just the way, it's a system-wide geo line that's called electricity/pools.
Oh, so it's electricity.
It's an electricity line, yeah, it should just be
Yes.
electricity, but it's a standard nomenclature throughout, so
So
we can
just out
easily
of
override it from
curiosity,
here too.
the electric, that's electric for just this building as an example.
Right?
Don't hate me. How does Canoa pay for their space here?
There's a formula for them for rent. You'll see it under income. They pay,
$2,002.
yeah, so it's
Including-
$24,000 a year.
And that's electric, that's everything.
That's, yeah, the usage of that space.
Could 25% of the buildings of 851's electric bill be charged to Canoa?
Is that only the 851 building, or is that parking lot lights and?
Yeah,
I'm sure we can
this-
break up
the building, the
851
facility is
as
what
a
we would
whole
consider it.
And look at 25% of the electric bill to appropriately charge to its tenant.
Just not for the
Just
parking
thought.
lot lights and the irrigation controls and those things.
Well, irrigation controls uses very little, it's 24 volts, so. hard
We
to
might
say.
be able to
Park on the
find, we
street,
might be
they
able to
don't
find a
have to
couple
park in the
dollars there,
parking
but
lot, pay for it.
it's up to y'all. Do you want me to do that?
No Canoa parking.
They can park on the street.
It's 25% of
pick it up.
46,000.
Fine.
All right, water, reclaimed water then? 6619?
Yeah, those are pretty much
$2,000 for
it.
water?
Yeah, water's expensive. This is where, you know, David had mentioned some resources on reducing our water usage, which would be a different watering control system for the sprinkler systems. Currently, we use the CDDs, Maxicom system that runs the majority of our parks, which has been functioning, but we really don't have a lot of control over how much water's being put out. So that's why we
Where do we
have
stand?
been looking
Where do we
at that.
stand with the new proposal? I met them and everything, so where does that stand?
We're waiting on it. We gave him all the information a week and a half ago, so we're waiting on that. And I've actually built into the budget, this is without anything. Ultimately, they're saying we'll save 35% of our watering costs, so it will pay over the next 3 years to install the equipment, because they have a capital program. So the savings that we make would go towards the expense of installing the equipment, and then we'd have the savings moving forward.
So
Would
Susan
the
has
equipment be
another,
a capital expense?
Pardon me?
Would the equipment be a capital expense?
yes.
Um,
Yeah.
No, it could be a reserve.
No, we don't have anything budgeted in your maintenance budget to pay for the upfront costs. But she has another separate sheet to reflect what your maintenance and operations budget would look like if we spend the capital dollars to do it. So I included the one without it, which is a little bit higher, but we do have that worksheet that we can look at the plug.
Right, and what we would do is we would pay for the equipment out of the savings that we have for water.
Well,
Or do it over
that's
time,
upfront.
but you would still have to write a check today, right?
Maybe not. They actually had a capital finance thing where basically you pay more money for your monthly fees for a period of 2-3 years, and then it goes down more and stuff like that.
So we might not have an out-of-pocket.
We might not have an out-of-pocket
Well,
expense.
I have a
but-
question. Wasn't this related to something to do with the sprinklers and the water for the CDD? Something is within the same system?
Yeah, we tap filters.
And
Yes.
we don't actually know if something is accurate, so
Right.
we're basing this off of inaccurate information.
No, they take the number of heads we have and percentage, how much water.
And it's
There's a
guess.
complicated
Really, it's a
Excel
guess.
spreadsheet
No
that
doubts.
Yes.
determines.
Will
But-
they chip in for replacing this?
Does this affect their sprinkler system too?
Right?
So what they're
It would
going to
not.
argue is that if they were to meter each one of our areas separately, that we'd end up paying a lot more money, that they actually are absorbing some of that. We could certainly talk to them about sharing in these costs with us. I don't know what their interest is, though.
There wouldn't be a benefit to them if, for our equipment, but If we can get them to share, that's fine, but they'll still be using their Mexicom system.
So they would still use theirs and we could use ours.
Right.
And ours would be
Split us
separately
off.
metered and they
Yeah,
would
we
pay
would
100%
split off of
of
their
theirs.
system.
Shouldn't they be separate? They should be separate, so in order to separate them, they
We
need.
never know what the bill
Yeah,
really is.
we're just taking that word.
Yes.
Correct.
So-
Well, like
We're
I said,
not
it's, but, so let's just be clear, though, they do have a spreadsheet that was built that has a formula in there for how we're determining where everything is. We probably could be more accurate by putting meters on our area specifically, but you'd have to pay for all those meters, and by the time you do that, you're throwing good money after bad, so it just makes more sense to
not a
upgrade
smart-
to a smart system at this point.
Right.
And be self-sufficient.
And here we're talking only, this is all about reclaimed water, all of this?
Correct. Correct.
All of our irrigation.
So this isn't, this is a separate water,
This building
that's
here?
not part of this water budget?
What?
We're gonna have a separate potable line.
It's minimal.
What
It's
is the
minimal,
question?
whatever it is in this building would be, in Heritage Hall would be minimal?
It is, yes, compared to the reclaimed, yes.
So it's really big saving, because there's a big jump in
There
water,
is a big number.
big numbers.
Went up tremendously last year.
And we don't have a clue what the cost,
Yes.
you said recovery maybe in 3 years. Is the estimate.
3 to 5.
We have a vision with no details. How's that?
We will have
They're coming.
details.
The aim is invest today to save tomorrow.
Right,
Well,
right.
it wouldn't even be invest today.
Well, that's true,
Jackson said
because
they
of-
wouldn't cut a check. They have a capital financing program, and I don't know if that interest rate is 10% or 1%. You know, if it's 1%, we do it. Maybe
course we
cut
do.
a check if it's smarter the other way.
Right.
But
How is that?
That would be worth
you
looking at.
literally know the same thing we know right now.
Good, okay.
How do we get invoiced on that reclaimed water? I mean, how do we know what our responsibility is on that?
What was the question, I'm sorry?
How do we get invoiced on that reclaimed water bill?
Oh, they base it on the number of minutes for each zone that's run. So the spreadsheet that was built years ago explains if there's 32 heads that flow 10 gallons a minute, they multiply that by the number of minutes that it runs, and that's how they bill us for the water.
Who bills us?
The ECDD.
Okay, so they send us a spreadsheet so we can actually see. It's not just you owe us this amount.
Right. They send us a
Right.
spreadsheet.
Okay.
Last
Per
year, they
area.
omitted one valve section, and they sprung it on us like in December.
Right,
When he hit us.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
the
it
spreadsheet.
changed the allocation between CROA and the service areas because one CROA meter was left out. And so that's all been corrected. We have measures in place to make sure it doesn't happen again.
I think we talked about that on the drive around, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah, we did.
The problem
We did.
here that causes this spreadsheet, though, is it's a savings you get for the community by doing a bulk rate through the water company. So
Right.
instead of paying their normal rate, now you're paying a bulk rate, but they'll only bill it one way. So to overcome that, you had to build this crazy spreadsheet that someone built years ago. It's a symptom of a problem. The problem is that we need our own allocated water
It
system.
would end up having to be billed the same way, only we would provide the data to them because we would have flow meters on each one of these new controllers that's
But
computerized and exact.
right.
Yes.
I have a hard time accepting that that's how they do billing. If somebody sent me a bill with a spreadsheet that's inaccurate, I turn around and say, figure out your billing system. That's not.
Kevin, their response is
Said
going to
that a
be
few
then we're
times.
done with the community-wide the discount, the bulk rate that you're getting,
Yeah.
and we'll do it the other way then, and everyone will pay more.
Yeah.
That's what will happen.
Yeah.
So
So-
right now, we got to fix the real problem, not the symptoms of the problem. The
So
real
we'll get
problem
more
is we need our
information
own.
and Figure out our next, we'll get more information and figure out our next steps.
I will tell you on the water usage, potable-wise though, getting back to the whole budget thing, is I noticed a spike increase of water usage at Spring Park. So we weren't quite sure where the increase was coming from, whether it was usage of the pool, water getting spent. $75 for a couple of water meters that we install ourselves. So each pool autofill has a meter on it, or will have a meter on it, so we know exactly what's using all that water. Because when it comes out of the ECDD's water meter, it can go to 5 or 6 different, distribution points at Spring Park alone. So we're trying to track that better and know exactly where the water's going.
Are there any janitorial supplies questions?
$24 increases or a wrench that you had to find?
I don't know about anybody else, but I'm living the dream right now.
All right.
No queries on that?
Well, if there's not, then that's our CROA budget presentation. Are there any, I mean, we have a half an hour at the end to ask questions. Do you want to ask anything related to CROA while we're on CROA?
Anything, how about the supplies, equipment, recreation? Do we need anything on that?
Unless you all have questions. I mean, I can tell you one of the changes that I did make was I moved money from personnel equipment admin that had, it was aquatic expenses, and I just put them down underneath aquatic expenses. So that's why you see aquatic expenses has gone up and personal equipment admin's gone down.
On the athletic field, you only have $900 for next year. And equipment.
For janitorial?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Oh, for equipment?
Equipment, supplies, recreation.
Is that
Sorry,
like for
maybe I
lining?
jumped ahead. Just kidding.
676. Pardon me. My phone's trying to.
This day can't get any straight.
When I wanted to do that, it won't do it.
CJC. All right, let's go down to CJC then.
Okay.
Patrick, if you want to come over.
What page?
The new template.
Actually, CJC.
What's that?
The CJC template, so in other words.
Page
Is
70,
that the one you gave us?
No.
page 76 of the printout,
Oh, page 76.
Oh, the printout, yeah.
It is?
Really? Do I
of the
have that?
printout.
Yeah, I was looking at something else.
Okay.
I thought it was before. It is before.
Am I in the wrong place?
Yeah, you're not
I do
too
not see
far.
page 76.
Oh, pardon me.
We are on.
Pardon me. Pardon me.
What page?
Hold on, we're getting there.
You gotta go all the way up to the beginning.
It's going to be up to the top.
Back to the beginning, right?
Oh, back to the beginning.
Sorry, page 12.
Back to the future.
Yeah, but we want to
12
look
of the
specifically
printout.
at Town Hall Network, which is going to be.
Sorry. 12.
Page 12?
12 of 93.
12 of 93, in the upper right corner.
Yes.
Is that the
Take Me
Town Hall
Home?
Network, is it?
Yeah, take me home.
Oh, yeah.
Please take me home. All right.
All right, so that's allocation from CROA. We need Town Hall Network. Hold on.
I'm not seeing where CJC is. See that part? I just don't see that.
Allocation.
Yeah, so that's the CJC.
Yeah, it's missing.
Uh,
Because it goes into electric.
I don't think it's in here.
Yeah, we were just looking for it.
Uh-oh.
It's pretty
All
straightforward.
right, well, there's only one way to skin a cat, so hold on.
See,
just
but
one
I
second.
know something should be under a different.
56,000.
Okay.
So CJC is going, I mean, no, I'm thinking, well, see, Canoa's going up 18,008. CROA's going up 56,006.
2575.
2575.
Where do you see the 25.7?
Right.
It's not here.
On this. Go, you have to go forward.
All right, Ms. Jameson, can we have a quick 5-minute break?
5-minute break?
Yeah.
And then that'll take us up to the end, okay?
I see.
Thank you for deactivating us, Patrick.
659 on the overall budget. We're going.
But I don't see.
And we're going to be live.
Office.
Thank you, Patrick. Patrick's checking the voice, and then he's going to assume a microphone. It's now 3:17, moving well on our agenda. We have something new in front of us.
Yeah, just so I can explain, we
Thank you.
had to take customized CCMC that are very heavily protected budget spreadsheets and turn them into something that we could send to you all. And I don't know what happened, it was a hectic day, but somehow this town hall network GL line got dropped from that, so we printed you off a separate copy and it's on here. And if anyone at home watching wants to get a copy of this, feel free to reach out to me and I'll do that. I imagine it's going to change after this conversation because there's two items I want to draw your attention to. One is network drops for the rooms, and that is to be able to ensure that we have our live streaming and our sound and quality. So we need to include some additional network drops. And then we also have in here data security key scan systems. And that's additional systems on the building here so that our rooms are locked down and will require key access to get into them, especially our rooms that have the data in them. And so those are items that I think we can probably put up on the parking lot and not have them as maintenance operation because they're one-time expenditures, and that can help us get that number closer to where we are. But again, Brian and I will wrestle with this and talk a little bit
So
more
you're
about
saying
it.
that is working capital expenditures?
They're projects as opposed to ongoing maintenance and
Is it
operation.
outside doors or just your office area?
We're talking about outside doors also. yeah.
Outside doors. I mean, I have to get my card up there.
No, they'll be open for the most part, but during normal operational hours, but we want to make sure that we have that scan system secured for the doors in case we need for after hours.
And much like a pool, you get to know who's coming in and out. You get to set certain security levels for staff, management, anyone that's coming into the buildings.
So basically, if it's a CROA board member, it doesn't let you anywhere.
Nowhere.
Okay.
Patrick, is there another line that I'm missing when it comes to the room and making sure that we have the live streaming and the videoing where it needs to be?
The problem with taking it off of here and making it projects is the working capital is 100% us. This is, if it's in CJC, it's 75-25. So I would vote that we keep it
Okay.
here, and the 75% that comes to us comes out of working capital. So that's how we'll do it, unless there's any complaints.
No, I switched I wouldn't ask you to do that. No, you're right. My brain's starting to fade a little bit after a long day, so yes, you are correct. So everything else are just ongoing expenses. The internet, the cell service, Microsoft license, email, these types of things. These are regular ongoing purchases that are shared costs, 75-25.
So just to clarify a few things, I know from either the first or second meeting of this board, and I think I see it here under computer purchase, wanting to make sure that personnel had the equipment necessary to do their jobs. Is that what that item is?
Correct. Under.
It brings us up to speed.
And Patrick built a long-term plan for that too, so when they're
Okay.
due for replacement.
Okay,
that type of thing.
so then the issues, and I don't think that was just addressed when we have the live stream and having some redundancy and making sure we have the cutting-edge equipment, is that incorporated in here?
I just want to remind you, we only had 2 incidents this year. It was 2
Understand.
times, but we did address that, we did look at it.
Yeah.
And our machine did not unplug unlike some other places recently.
I'll put it on pause.
We know nothing about any unplugged
Just-
machines, so we're, nope.
No, we've been operating
Okay.
full steam.
Does this also include, because I witnessed in the last week, someone using the handheld microphone? Do we have top-quality equipment that's amenable to people who aren't used to using microphones? In other words, the handheld microphone that I witnessed in this room within the last week, it was right here, someone was holding it right here, and it was not picking up. Yeah, celebrators. It was not picking up. Do we have top-quality equipment?
Well, we do have a number of microphones. Unfortunately, I did not witness this, so I can't speak to
You
what
were
happened
there.
that day.
You just have to hold the mic right up to the mouth.
Yeah, which is a little hard for people who don't hold
A lot of people
microphones.
talk, they hold it here
Yeah.
and here, and you can't.
Do we have something that has
We
a little?
did purchase 3 microphones, JR, recently.
I don't know what it was.
Handhelds
Was it on?
that were 4. I think it was 4 microphones. Yeah, and they're omnidirectional, which picks up from all directions, a higher quality, and those were purchased this year, so
Okay.
I don't see a need to go out and purchase additional microphones.
As long as we have top quality
I like the old-fashioned feel of, oh, I'm sorry.
of yelling.
Megaphones.
I'm using your.
I'm sure you can all hear me now.
How's cell service working? I haven't checked. Do we have a lot of outstanding, or is that working okay still, or is it?
Todd and Suzanne are our primary heavy users of it, and they are taking everything from submitted to received on a daily basis, because I get the updates regularly. We have to schedule the work, though, so when we get residents submitting things, it turns into part of the work plan of whether or not it's a top priority, has to be done now, or does it get done 2 or 3 weeks from now? And they put some communication in there. Listen, we're addressing this as part of the plan. It'll be done in October. And then in October, if it's not done, we have to go back and justify and give a good reason for it or close it out.
Well, I was also going to say the number of issues we're seeing on cell service has declined substantially as a result of the new landscaper.
Well, I don't know, maybe that's because Eric and I have not been sending them as many in.
Well, we haven't gotten as
Eric was
many
our power
from.
user.
Yeah.
Now, I got another question in line with that. Have we seen the number of people using cell service, in other words, signing up for the service, increase, or where are we at with that? Do we need to push that?
1,500 users last time I looked? Or is it
Right, and so the only number that's really there as far as usage is how many people have downloaded, who so
Who have
there's
downloaded.
Right, who actually own that.
My question is, do we need to push it as a board to get involved with cell service, submit these requests or anything like that? No, you don't think so?
The important part of cell service is that it offers additional eyes and ears in the community, but there's a fine line between that and being bogged down with people just nitpicking on every little item. It's in a good spot right now. I think we need to just kind of let it go where it is.
And I also think when I talk to new homeowners out front, or somebody brings an issue that could have easily been handled on cell service, I tell them, certainly I'll take that and we'll resolve it, but you also have this other tool, and I think that staff as a whole are very proactively talking to our residents about cell service if they come up with a complaint.
But I don't think we need to put together another marketing campaign to remind people that it's out there.
So a follow-up on cell service, you talked about some customizing of responses to requests? Is that what I heard a moment ago?
It's just pretty much how we answer.
So what I was hearing a month or two ago is that if I put in a request on cell service that gets referred to CDD, because it's really CDD stuff, I get a response back that says this has been taken care of. In other words, we, CROA, are done with this.
Well, so if it's a CDD, we just reflow it to CDD and we do not close it out. So you're probably hearing 2 different things. If it's a county or it's another entity that's not participating in cell service with us, then yes, we'll facilitate it to them and then we close it because they're not using the system.
Understand. So to make it clear to the resident that it's been referred to the appropriate agency that handles this,
Right.
Can our response say that?
That's exactly what our response says. If it's the CDD though, CDD is part of this system and we reflow it, we just click to them and it reflows to them and then they'll get a message with the CDD's disclaimer. CDD may be closing it out and saying it's done, and that may be what residents are responding to, but that's, when it comes to managing the work, once it's workflowed to them, that's their responsibility.
Okay, so 2 other things, and one goes back to Todd. I remember a discussion a year ago with Todd about a maintenance software system that cell service was going to merge with. Have we heard any update on that?
No,
No,
it's
he's
not here.
left, but Patrick knows about this.
Well, I don't know the full, I don't know exactly where we are right now with
Okay.
that. Yes, we were in hopes of making them merge. What we found out was most of the companies out there, they don't necessarily work with other companies.
Right, they don't, yeah.
Right, they won't support
Right, they do their
a
own.
joint partnership. So the last I spoke with Todd, and I'd much rather Todd here too,
Okay.
so I don't misspeak, but it was trying to see if we could get that program
Right.
without all the bells and whistles that would pretty much mimic what seller service does as well.
Okay.
But it will take care of the tracking of equipment and
Something to help
facility.
So
him more.
Excella, the company that purchased public stuff,
Excel, yeah.
has, it's one product in their portfolio of products. They have another product called Excella, and it does a lot more than what we want, and it costs a lot more
Yeah.
than what we want to pay.
Okay.
So what they're trying to do is, and we know it works with public stuff, figure out if there's a smaller version of it that will do what
Okay.
we're looking for.
Pretty much a dumbed down
And
version.
it was all built, all of the software was built for municipalities, much larger than we are.
Right.
So we don't need the Cadillac
Right.
when we can get. the
So as long
full-
as that's still on the radar screen.
It's still on the radar. Cost is the biggest deal because
Okay.
they charge on a per user basis, and
Okay.
that adds up quickly.
The other question goes directly to you. If we think of ourselves, and one of our cornerstones is, as a technology-based and cutting-edge community, what else could be on your wish list? Or does this include everything? Does this take us where we need to be technologically forward?
I'd like to come back to you with something.
I really like Bowen's idea of getting the right group of people together, and certainly Patrick could be part of that group who could brainstorm.
Okay, that's
If we had
good.
a technological committee, because I could sit here and tell you my opinion, and it would be worth nothing, because I don't know what I'm talking about. We need some people who could really be cutting edge on that. I think.
Committees that focus on each cornerstone, like you said. That's the way to do it.
I agree. I think that there's a difference between maintenance and operation dollars and then what we need to do. And this goes back to some of the conversations Jackson's been having. What do we need to do from a big picture in this community to really
Right.
step up that technology
Okay.
cornerstone? I don't think you can address it in a one-year maintenance and operation budget.
Okay.
And
So
it's
in
not
terms
really
of
fair
the
to ask
one-year
Patrick
maintenance-
to.
But in terms of the one-year maintenance and operations, are you comfortable with this budget, Patrick?
Yes,
Just
I
let
am.
us do, so, on an ongoing basis, this is okay, but if we're thinking bigger picture, more globally, then
It would be good on a future workshop agenda to put a
Okay.
technological committee
Totally.
and launch it, because we would need time to go find the right people who have interest in that.
Correct.
On the subject of CJC, so I guess what I have here is, it goes to Kevin's point about 75-25 is, if I remember right, we authorized at the last board meeting about $7,700 for the architectural fees, front and back, and we know that we'll go for quotes and stuff like that. How are we billing those things so that CROA is paying part of that expense? Because if it's part of the 851 building, it should be part of the rent, I think. And I thought, and I'm just asking here, but I thought we billed that as a CROA expense, but really I think it should be a CJC expense.
It was a reserve.
Pardon?
It was a reserve expense for CROA. Because the building is CROA's.
Well, why wouldn't it be part of the rent? They're gonna get the advantage.
We can certainly talk about a methodology for increasing their rent if that's what you'd like to do. But it would have to be in part of the income line. We haven't typically billed them, so if you're renting a house from somebody and the homeowner decides they want to completely redo their landscaping, does the homeowner charge the renter?
It's purely a 75-25% split, but if they're paying part of this building and your services and stuff, wouldn't it be fair?
Well, they
They're
may
paying
not,
operations.
they may
They pay
not
rent.
pay for, because they don't own the building, so they're not gonna
Right.
pay for the increase. However,
They're paying
the
off
value of the
value
building is more, though.
just like if I put a new kitchen in, my tenant's gonna pay a couple of dollars more.
Yeah, if
'Cause
they
you're
don't-
changing your
They
rent.
don't have
You're
their
changing your
budget
rent.
yet, so now's the time to talk about whether or not we want to look at the $24,000 in rent that they're paying.
How long has it been at 24?
Just a couple of years. I think 2015 was the first year that they started paying.
In light
Oh,
of
the
the
first
fact
year they started
that
paying.
we know we've got this, we know we had the
Well,
architectural
it's
fee,
a-
we know we're looking at expenses. I mean, I think now is the time to cross that bridge.
Okay, well, we'll take a look at it and see if we can come up with a methodology for what that increase would look like.
Okay.
So before 3 years ago, there was no rent? Is that?
No, yeah, it might have been 14, it might have been the first year that I got here
Okay.
when they started paying.
So the rent is 3 or 4
Yeah.
years old?
Is the rents, this is a great question, the rent's not gonna be 25% of what the expense of the building is it?
That's not the formula, no, it wasn't. It's,
Is it based on square footage?
yeah. I mean, you gotta talk about the actual usage of the building, so.
25%?
No, it doesn't, it's not apples for apples when it comes to that. I mean, it literally is the small amount of time that we spend on CROA work out of our offices, and then the amount of time that they have meetings here, which is once a quarter. So I don't think that would be a fair assessment. When a majority of the work or the activity that's taking place here is CROA. I mean, it's slammed with CROA programming and those types of things.
Just think about it, if there's any adjustment needed.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so the last item that we have then is insurance and taxes. I'll let Susan talk a little bit about that.
Okay, I took our actual expenditures, because every year Lou Byron, who is our, pardon me?
What page are you on?
Oh, sorry, yeah, we'll go back to your board packet then, and you can look on page 25.
And actually, have we skipped over member communication?
Oh, you know what? I did skip over member communication because you just gave us direction to do a magazine budget. What you see here is not that, so there's no point in us talking about it. Let's just let us redo it.
Insurance and taxes.
Keep moving, will you?
Sorry to interrupt you.
Okay, so,
What
the
page?
insurance.
What page? I'm sorry.
Oh, I don't know
25.
what page. 25 is what Steve says.
24, property taxes?
Let's do insurance first, right?
D&O?
25.
Okay, I got it. Thank you, all right.
So which page, I'm sorry?
25.
You know?
Okay.
Why are we spending time on this?
I don't know. Do we need to?
No, we don't.
Okay. Yeah.
I
we're
really
good.
don't, I think CJC's done.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we're done. So from a budget perspective, we'll just take questions, anything that we haven't answered up to this point.
When do our checks come?
I'm going to double your pay because of how efficient and effective you were today.
I would just like to say that publicly, I think the framework that you've given us, Brian, is a game changer. And my hope is that those folks that are watching on video or watch it later now have not only the framework, but that we've asked questions that make it open and obvious and transparent what we're doing and why we're doing it. And whether people agree or not, at least they know what we're doing and what our rationale is for it. And I very much appreciate that, and I hope the community appreciates the work that you put in to make that happen. That's a big, big deal.
It's a big,
Good job.
Brian,
Good job.
I can tell you this is my 5th year doing budgets, and it's by far the best. Brian brings a lot of insight that we just haven't had in the past, and I think it's made this a lot more efficient, a lot more effective process. It's going to make our job easier moving this thing forward in the future, because we have spent a lot of time in the weeds of the budget, and this process is working. In fact, we'll document this, and this should be part of that sustainability model moving forward. Every board in management should do this way. So good job. Thank you, Brian.
Okay, game plan. We're gonna put something out next Tuesday, which will be my sheets. And we'll add some of these other notes where appropriate. We'll start it with something that talks about a reconcilement of what changed, so you can kind of follow the big picture. I'm expecting that it'll balance. If you get that next Tuesday, meeting with Jackson's 5-day rule, you'll have plenty of time to review it, come back with comments. I mean, we won't have an official, we got the board meeting, but we're not gonna talk about it at this board meeting, but we need board feedback. Yeah, I like it or I hate it, but if you hate it, silence is not golden. Say what you hate. It would be my intention then to use that same type of structure format on those pages at the actual board meeting where we go through the board to just talk about it big picture wise, and then people can provide their comments and feedback.
And we have to send a letter out at the beginning of October so that residents know that it'll be voted on at the end of the month. So as we talk about that, we'll talk about the narrative and how we want that written.
a proposed budget.
Correct, yeah, it's not a final until you all
So we vote on
it
it in October.
Right. And then once you vote and approve it, then we'll send a note card out to everybody, letting them know what the next year's assessment's gonna be, trash fees, those types of things.
So I had two last things just to circle back around. One thing we said at the beginning was we would revisit the long-term strategic planning process, that four-part thing. Are we still at this page?
Oh, yeah.
We said we would revisit it, and the other is if there's a need to schedule another budget meeting. So we had said we would see if we needed another budget meeting or something additional to the workshop that we already have scheduled.
Can we
So those are
let
two
Brian and I
questions.
update it first, do the email out, and then make our determination from there?
So
on
the
how-
question is if we need
Right.
that.
Yeah. You might not.
If we put out something next Tuesday and people are basically in agreement with it, or when it needs minor tweaks, we don't need another meeting.
Right.
If somebody comes back and says, I've got a serious problem, or, then we'd have to have a discussion, otherwise we're in good shape. And I'll go on record on the rolling, go ahead.
And then the slight modification on that is October 1st is our next formal workshop. So we could, if we only needed a discussion for 15 minutes, we could do that. I mean, that's a possibility.
I would be happy, and I think Steve would too, to come to the October 1st meeting if we wanted to spend 10 minutes on the budget to do a final review. This is the budget, any last comments?
Yeah.
I think we could do that easy.
Okay.
Is that enough time to send it out in print?
Yes, if we do it October 1st, we can get it out to
We can
everybody.
find,
It's not required by law, it's just something
It's
that
good
Celebration's
practice.
always done. So.
Today's the 10th. If we send it out next Tuesday, that is the 18th.
It's 2 weeks
That's going
before.
to really give you 12 days to review it. If you hate something, you respond quickly. If
But-
everybody thinks it's pretty much there, we can do a minor tweak after the 1st, and then we'll have a package ready.
can you do some proposed dates? Like if you hate something, let us know by something. So then back to the larger one, proposed strategic planning process. Where are we with that at this point? We've kind of assumed that, that this is,
I would like to bring Nicole in, and it's at CCMC's expense. They'll fly her in and have her go over the annual community survey database and a little bit about the benchmarking. You all can ask her some more questions. And I think that that's a key piece to really bring this all home.
I think it's beneficial.
Yeah, I love it.
is that needed in September, October? Because those are very busy.
I would prefer November.
I think that's a November,
November's fine
December
also.
thing.
Okay.
Okay.
I can let her know November to start.
Is that okay?
Now, how fast would we like to start the master plan redo? I would think quickly, but who? Tomorrow. How do we?
Yesterday.
Almost, in all
Yesterday.
seriousness, I think that Jack is kind of right. But
think
then
you're
how
right.
do we want to go about that? When can we put that on the agenda to get it rolling? And that would
I
require
have
some
3 proposals
consultants.
in my emails that just haven't read yet, so I need to go through them, get back with them, and then I can get something to you, hopefully. I mean, I know
Do we
we were
want to
due
put it
last
on the
week, so.
agenda?
October 1st.
Yeah, I will,
It'll
I'll
just
do
be a
everything
longer
I
workshop.
can to get it in September, but it wouldn't hurt us if we did not, if got it approved in October, right?
I would
can
vote
post
on
back-
October 1st. If
October
we
1st
had a
works.
longer meeting that could add this to the agenda.
Okay,
it'd
so
be
I'm
great.
going to add that. We had 2 other things to put on there. The conflict of interest with the consultants, and then the technological committee. So let's just put all those on there. I'll float a new agenda out, and let's all just kind of try to prioritize. Maybe a plan for a 2.5-hour meeting.
I think we need to
Except for,
also,
I just think that we're going to need that.
I think we need to plan for, in order to address, our strategic plan, I think we need to do some field trips to some community centers around here. I don't know if Steve was
Right.
months ago, but I think we need to look at some of these things and get some ideas.
Wouldn't we do that when we do the master plan?
Yeah, I want them to.
Well,
as part of-
before that, so that we can have an idea when we come in.
Before we
Let's-
do the master
That can
plan,
feed into that process.
We need to
what
know.
about community input on this master plan?
That's part of the
That's
needs
part of the
assessment.
process
right.
here,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Well, and I think we should talk to the facilitator about what field trips looks like. Let's try and keep it from being too all across the board and let them guide us through the process. This
Yeah,
is
I
what
mean,
they
the field
do.
trips were the point of contention last year, one of the points of contention. And I would prefer that we continue to be working in a collaborative environment and not raise the specter of, free agency.
I think what you're probably going to hear from the planner is that your big picture facilities master plan is to talk about what the community wants, what the needs are, and a lot of those needs will fit into a community center. When you hire a design firm for the community center, they'll do another charrettes type meeting with residents to talk about how do you want this thing to look, and as they get that feedback in the master plan information, they'll start designing it. They'll start putting it together and bring you back a design for it.
Well, you know, part of the issue on that last one, though, is there was a large group of certain residents that cared a certain way. So, I mean, we have to be careful to
You
balance.
always have that.
Yeah.
And again, we got to make sure we're communicating to residents that if you're going to do anything, this is the time to speak, because if you don't show up to these meetings, your voice won't be heard, and it'll be built and designed by the way that the people that showed up to the meeting want it to be designed.
But I think we shouldn't be doing that. I mean, if you get a small vocal few that come to a meeting just because you have them here, I think the decision has to be based on more than that.
That's the needs assessment from the facilities
Can we
master plan.
tie this into, and this is not meant to be offensive in any capacity, but when we roll out the next election that happens for CROA,
Yep.
can we tie this into a similar software when you vote for your candidates at that point? Because we have to connect to every resident then. Perhaps have something.
Are you talking about another survey?
A locked survey with a locked link of prioritize the things that you may want in the community.
Well, so if we bring Nicole in November, we have some time to talk about how we strategically do a master plan needs assessment survey, this annual community survey to gauge satisfaction. We just need to have those conversations of when these surveys, because you don't want to bombard your residents with too many surveys, then they'll just shut down and not answer anything. But I think a campaign to tell people, hey, it's time for you to get involved in what the next 10 years of celebration look like. And really do something that kind of gets the word out there so we can get more than the traditional 800 people responding to these surveys.
Instead of a survey, then could you have something like a town hall where the planner would have these board presentations like?
That's part of it too. They do a stakeholder meeting, so they usually do both. They do a community-wide needs assessment, and they do it statistically valid data where they can try and pinpoint from each village and different types of usage. And then they'll do another stakeholder meeting where the different user groups will be invited, and they'll come and put dots on the board and go that way.
Steve, Lot D, what is the entitlement that we have for size of building that we place?
25,000 square feet.
And can that be any bigger?
It's written in the CCRs that it's 25,000, yeah.
Okay.
You have to change them.
So that's one of the things that you need to consider, and I would suggest that was one of the reasons we did the field trip down to Wyndham, to First Baptist Kissimmee, is that was a 25,000 square foot building. So not that you know what the content of the building would be, but at least you'd have an idea of the size and what you can do with the building.
I think if the board makes a decision that we want to send representatives of the board out to do this, like you're suggesting or Vaughn's suggesting, at the appropriate time, I think it makes great sense to do it. I think what we don't want, at least what I don't want to see, is people going off on their own and doing it and coming back and saying, well, I went over to look at this place on my own, or I took a field trip to Colorado to see a place, and here's what I think. I'd like to avoid that. So I think the process that you're describing is a good process to help us get that information and then be able to take, hey, here's the real requirements and what's available and what can we look at and what do our designers tell us and our architects and so on. We're going to need a lot of information. This is not going to happen immediately.
Well, instead of a designated couple people going, why can't we do like a drive around like we did and everybody go together
The party
as
bus.
a board? No?
Party bus?
The party bus.
Well, I mean, you don't put a cooler on the bus.
Yeah,
No,
but
Gary, you got a comment?
But there's two issues here. One is the overall master plan, and the other is community center.
Yeah, and I think we need the master plan.
I think we need the master plan first.
And then I think the community center falls out.
Somewhere in there.
There's somewhere
I think
in
we
the-
could probably speculate that building's going to rise pretty high up, but I think we need to, but this will avoid the perception that we always talk about, that we're trying to manipulate the process in any way. I love the idea of a clean facilities master plan that's an outside firm's doing that we had no influence over other than as stakeholders when it comes time to do that in the process.
Gary has a comment?
Regarding the master plan, I would go back to read the preface of the forward of the current one, and you'll see that everything he talked about was the meetings, stakeholders, the survey, the guidance of the committee, and all those forums were part of the original master plan. And I think you'd want to include all those, because if you leave anything out, somebody in the community is going to say that you biased it one way or the other.
And the difference between that one and this one is that those things were done in pieces and were pulled together through a task force because of the necessity. We would have spun our wheels forever. We might not have built anything up to this point if we didn't do that. But now's the time to say, where are we from what we've already built? We don't need to redo a overall level of service. We know, we've pinpointed, we know where all the neighborhood parks are. We've inventoried all of our systems. So we can save a little bit of money from what we would have paid to have it started from scratch. It's just an update at this point, and it's time to get some more feedback from the residents on what the needs are.
Okay, another budget item. Where do, the county budget is effective October 1. Where do we stand with feedback from the county?
Yeah, that's a great question. They said that they were still working on it. I have not gotten a copy of it yet.
I have a concern because it's September 10,
And
we're
there's
setting
two
here,
big storms out in the Atlantic.
21 days from now.
I have a major.
If we're going to approve an interlocal agreement that's on our September agenda,
Well, they've said that those capital dollars are there, before they even started about redoing this ordinance. My concern is getting the update on where they are with the ordinance change, and then getting a copy of that new interlocal agreement, so you
And
all
I
can start looking at it.
remember distinctly in our last meeting, that her saying, you want to make sure you get the ordinance and the budget and the interlocal all signed at the same time quickly, so you don't lose it. I mean, I'm nervous about this.
and then we need to give them updated budget numbers, because they were talking 50%.
They were talking 2 million.
They were talking 2 million when
50%, so
when our number, because they used the term 50%.
I would just like request Steve to start staying a lot more on top of this one, because it makes me nervous. That's the reason I'm bringing it up here.
Yeah, I would like us to not be the football in the Charlie Brown and Lucy.
Actually, I don't think are we limited to the October 1 date, even though it's their fiscal year, because the money's there.
Yeah, but
It's not going to change October 1.
I've heard school stories.
The money's
What if
always there.
Florence moves south? I mean, the faster we get this.
Closure is closure.
Closure, that's my fear.
I just don't think October 1's a deadline for
I just think it's in the
I-
budget.
It's already, the money's in the
They
budget.
said the money's already set aside.
It's already set aside.
I didn't
October
tell
1
us
is not going
in
to
our
affect
account.
the money.
I just want it.
Show me the money. Give me my money.
Any other discussion? We're way ahead of time, we're okay with that.
Motion and second.
Motion and second?
Actually, I think what we should do is we should move this meeting to town hall, or to the town.
I second that.
I am beat.
Thank you for your good work. Brian, thank you, Steve and Susan,
Yep.
and the team, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for reading ahead of time, reading over the weekend. I said it.
Second.
It was somewhere over here,
No.
Vaughn and Kevin.
Second.
Oh, Vaughn and Jackson, sorry. All in favor for closing? Aye. Any opposed? We're closed, thank you.
So we're trying to talk on Wednesday.
You really going to town?